Order work sessions, or I just announced?
Yes, sir.
them? Oh, I called to order them. Okay. This is our work session of the City Commission of Tuesday, May 8th, 2012. You want to take the roll? No flag salute.
Commissioner Mom? Here. Commissioner Pauley? Here. Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Roth? Mayor Neely?
Here. Okay. We have here time for future agenda items. I don't know if it's appropriate for a work session. I did mention this to the city manager today at a meeting we were at, and I think we need some form of update on the remand that came from. I'll finish my. You're nodding, so you're agreeing to get it to us somehow.
Signed, Your Honor.
The remand that we got from Luba regarding our concept plan for the Beaver Creek area.
My reports at the next meeting.
Okay, great. Anybody else have anything for future agenda item?
I do. I'm not sure exactly where it needs to go, but I wanted to kind of talk about the Urban Renewal Commission and how it stands. You know how we talked about it last time, and if it's going to move to a 7-person. We never really talked about it at a city commission level. So is that something we need to talk about at a city commission level?
I think we did talk about it at a city commission level, but I don't think we made a formal decision.
We were directed at the last meeting to bring that back to you, and we're expecting sometime toward the end of June to have some 2 or 3 different versions of the resolution.
All right.
To achieve, I think it was 7 members at large.
Yeah.
I don't remember all the criteria, but Eric has them, and we're working on.
Very good.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other items for future agenda? Okay. What we have before us, discussion items. Ermitinger House. Mr. Archer.
I'll be taking that, or at least starting it off for you. Good evening, Mayor and Commission. Tonight, what we're going to be doing with regard to this topic is a few things. I'm going to be giving kind of a progress update and seeking your feedback and your general consensus of support where we're at or other direction, so that we know we're on the right track. Essentially that's kind of our main goal, is that as you probably remember, we entered into a consultant agreement with Architectural Resources Group, ARG. Maya Fody and her team are here tonight, and they're going to be Maya's going to be walking you through an update presentation on the findings and just generally kind of where we're at with that. As you well recall, one of your goals, one of your major goals is to restore and preserve the Ermitinger House, and so this is a major part of that in terms of what Maya's team is tasked with is developing our restoration plans, the architectural and engineering plans, so that we may, when we've got our funds all accumulated, that we may go forth and actually do the project. So this is the precursor to actually doing the physical project, but you've got to have, obviously, the final plans in place. And as of right now, our timeline is that we would have final plans by about the end of June. Is that what we're kind of on that timeline? Maybe. Yeah, I mean, that's so probably even a little sooner than that. So they're on schedule, or even probably a little bit ahead of that. And depending on our discussion tonight, that we'll hopefully continue on that path. We continue to seek to put the entire funding package together for the restoration project. We've updated you previously on some of the details of that, so I won't go into all that unless you have specific questions. But essentially, we're getting closer and closer to having a funding package. We've got one outstanding grant that we're waiting for final approval on at this point, which is the Community Development Block Grant. Things are looking pretty positive for that. Again, the Commission has, we've put into our proposed budget for next fiscal year some additional city funds that add to that, and we've recently taken some action. Actually, it was at your last regular Commission meeting where we set up the separate Ermitinger Preservation Fund, is what I believe is what we've titled it, where that money, any money that comes in either from the city's dedicated funds or from any type of grants that we have or will receive, will just be into that fund so that it doesn't attach to any other program lines. With that, what I'd like to do at this point is invite Maya to come forward. Again, Maya Foti is with Architectural Resources Group, and I'll let Maya introduce the other two members of her team. I also want to acknowledge Christina is here tonight, Robertson Gardner. I know you all know Christina. She's been a big part of helping us with the project and helping us write our grants, and just has been a tremendous help. So on loan from community development, and then Denise Kai is here as well to help answer any questions if those come up. Denise, our Assistant Parks and Recreation Director, who's been also working very, very hard on this project from when we first discovered the structural issues to kind of where we're at now, and looking forward to working through to completion. So with that, I'll have Maya come on up to the table and introduce her team, and then Maya's going to walk through an update.
Thank you for listening. We're very excited to present our findings. We'll try to be as concise as possible, but we've been working on this for 2 months now, so we've got a lot of information to share in a short amount of time. We did issue the report and the drawings. I don't know if you guys read that. There's also the structural report that was done. I think it was done in recently, 2009. There's the preservation plan from 2002. There's the National Register nomination. So I guess I'm assuming that you guys are more kind of up to date on all that, because otherwise we'll be here all night kind of starting from which I'd love to do. Anyway, am I talking too far away? Our team, so we're basically the architects. Mark Nelson is the structural engineer. Mark Nelson is actually the one from Sigma Engineering who actually did the original structural analysis, the report that was done recently. He's very familiar with the building. And Bill Hawkins is an architect, a historical architect, and he's taken on a role as advisor and architectural historian and has gone above and beyond to doing research on this building as it deserves. And so both of them are here to answer questions. I'm, again, going to kind of present our findings, basically what's in the report, and then if you guys have any questions or whatever, we're all three here to answer the questions. So basically, let me see, go to...
Can we put the lights down?
And from the beginning. So that's the team. And again, if I say something that is not logical, again, we've been doing this intensely for almost 3 months now, so I'm assuming that you guys are following my train of thought, and I skip things, so just tell me to backtrack. So basically, this is the house as it appeared in 1890, which is not necessarily what it looked like when it was constructed. Again, I'll just repeat, even though everybody knows the importance of this house. The house was built in 1845. It may have been 1844. It was the last building built by the Hudson's Bay Company. It's not actually a builder, and it very closely ties the Ermatinger House to the Hudson's Bay Company, which of course has its own separate, very interesting and deep history in the Northwest. The second thing, the reason this building is so important, obviously, is its age. It's the third oldest wood frame structure in Oregon, oldest in Oregon City. And lastly, Ermatinger is a famous personage in his own right because of his ties to Hudson's Bay. And also we're saying that we have, what is accepted is the fact that there was a coin toss in this house which named the city of Portland. So I just want to keep that's why this house is important. And I want everybody to just keep that in mind, because we were basically tasked with, okay, restore this house. Well, usually you have a historic structure report which breaks down every material, how old it is, and we didn't have that. So we're like, okay, well, we'll restore it, but what are we restoring, really? And it turns out that there's a lot of stuff in this tiny little house, which makes it really super exciting and kind of frustrating, because you want to have at least a year or two to kind of go through every nail and let it tell its story. So basically, this is what the house appeared like in 1857, which would have been 13 years after its construction. And as we can see, it has the flat roof, which is still there. Flat, it's a shed roof, it's not flat. And it has a soldered metal roof, which is still there, and it's actually in very good condition. It leaked. They overframed it pretty early on. This is the addition on the back, and this addition is going to become important later on, so keep this image of the addition in your mind. Some sort of canopy, maybe for the horses. In this era, they had outhouses, privy somewhere on the property. We have an image of a couple windows. This window, we're not quite sure is there. That chimney, we're pretty sure is still in the same location as where it occurs now. This is a photo of the building taken in 1880. As you can see, this addition is significantly different. It's higher. It's not as high as the third addition. It's wider. And you can actually see, and I had a picture of this in the report, where you can actually see this line where it cuts through the bottom sill of the window. Again, incidentally, these three windows are still original. They were never replaced. They're the exact same 6/6 configuration, and we actually have the report done by the person who did the wood window construction renovation. She did a very good survey and report, and those three windows are original, and she has documented as to why she knows that, so that's interesting. Here's a picture of the building taken during the flood. I guess this is, again, not a very detailed photograph, but it again tells us it had shutters on the front. It gives us what the porch configuration looked like. It gives us an idea as to what the handrails look like. Again, we've only seen the shutters on the north elevation, or I'm sorry, the south, what we're calling now the south elevation. Why only on the south? Were they all there? Were they taken down? We don't know. All we know is that one photograph shows it, and this photograph shows it. Yes?
I've never seen the photographs prior. Yeah, these.
These you have, but thanks to Photoshop. No. Not that I've added anything.
I guess
You can zoom in, and you can play with the, so it was basically there. It was just tiny. Just zooming in and playing with the resolution.
So it was
Okay,
it was a
I
large
guess-
photograph.
It's a large, very deep, and I actually got these at the Oregon Historical Society, and they actually gave me super high resolution scans. And I could not do that, unfortunately. It was very frustrating with the Clackamas County one. These ones, for example, just
Yeah.
as a side, these are photographs of photographs. They don't actually have, or maybe
Right.
they do, but a lot of them they don't. So there's nothing I could do. I would zoom in, and all you see is just a blur. It really doesn't help.
I would love to see the non-blown up versions.
And
Because I'm trying to place. I mean, I know where the house was, but then I'm trying to look at these other buildings, and it was fairly close to the river. But that
Yep, the river
image
goes
doesn't
through here.
imply that. Okay.
You know why? Because it's right.
It's
The
so
road
dark.
is. Now my arrow is going. If my arrow were to pass on the far side of the building,
Okay.
the river is going that way.
Okay.
And you guys have seen these images because
Yeah.
they're all. Assuming you've read all the reports.
Those are really great.
Yeah, the preservation plan has all those greener images, and I have them all
Okay.
as full size, and they're really good. So if anybody wants to see, I mean, you guys own them, so you can, you can get them. Thank you. Do you
He wants to look at it.
I assume there are other copies.
No, and again, those are, it's a photocopy of a photocopy,
Yeah.
and I have the scan, which is like, I don't know how many DPI, but it's really high resolution.
Yeah.
It's a tiny, like that
Right,
big. So
right.
Anyway. So
Now
this is, I'm
this-
going to keep, should I keep talking?
Yeah, go ahead.
The roof.
I know I'm on.
Go
The
ahead.
roof on the back there is the addition, is it?
So going back, I'm
That
sorry,
one-
to this
that one
one.
you got, yeah.
So this is the third edition.
Okay.
Okay? And we know that as a fact, for a fact, because if you look here, this is not the same
No.
elevation. Now we have this door, which I have not run across any reason as to why there was a door there, but it's a different facade. I mean, I'm assuming it might have been at some point they were going to have
The
stairs
door
there.
on the upper part.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, when when the house was at its second location, there was a I mean, it was on a slope, so I'm assuming that there was a patio that was on the upper part of that slope.
You know, the
That was where
photographs
it went out.
don't show that, but I've only seen a couple photographs. The photographs I saw of that house in that location did not show a staircase at that location. And there's no marking on the building that would indicate that there was anything attached to the building. Because then, again, So, and we know that that door is also not original to the, it's not an original, I mean, it was, I don't know, Bill, it was some sort of bungalow door. It's not historic. We're not thinking it's anywhere near the 19th century. This is a good photograph taken during its move, and it's a really interesting photograph because you just see, wow, you know, a lot, it was changed a lot, and I was just noting to the team earlier today that when I looked at the National Register nomination, it had stated that for a time, they didn't even know that the Ermitanger House was the Ermitanger House.
Right.
You know, because it looks so different. And here's an example. I mean, you could really see, so basically moving from left to right, this window's there, this is there, door is there. This was basically replaced in 1987 to make it look like it had. Same with the door, and we'll actually see a view of this on the inside where it was infilled. These windows, I'm sorry, they're 12 over 12. These were replaced in 1987 to look historic. Same for these. These were replaced to become full height windows. And to be perfectly honest, the only thing that I can see that guided that decision was perhaps, you know, maybe you can see some shadow here of the shutter. I mean, that's basically what has guided this, and you know why it's frustrating because you know we really don't have any better documentation than those photographs. Anyway, so let me see what else. The other interesting thing to note, basically this top plate is continuous all along. That's why we think that some portion of this building is part of the original.
Wow.
The siding is consistent. Now that might have been because it was recited. I know F&F, I think, are you here, F&F?
Yeah.
I came and I talked to you. You know, these are the questions, and again, this is 30%, so if you have anything, then, you know, definitely just say, hey, I have a picture of that, Mom. And then this is a picture of the far side again. This is actually, I think it's the upper sash is historic and was able to be preserved, and these three, this window, and the one on the far side, all historic. And again, you guys have a report by the person who did that who shows, you know, the historic construction. Put in the elevations just to refresh your memories. This is the south elevation. This is the east elevation. Let's see. This is the north elevation. Again, why is the door there? It's unclear. These windows are a little bit, this is more consistent with what was the windows on the main elevation, may have been moved, we don't know. And this is the west elevation. Again, this is the configuration.
Now, is that the same addition we saw at the second, at its second move, or you don't know?
You know, we are thinking that what may have happened is the wall remained, but they just lifted it up. And we know that they never had the attic because that door was put in later, and we know that. So we're thinking that there are elements that are original configuration-wise, but definitely not the height. Not to mention, just from an aesthetic standpoint, the fact that it runs into the entablature, like right there.
Right.
You know, it just doesn't, it's not what the building wanted. And it's also caused leaking problems in that one location. This is a view of the roof. From looking back, and this is one of the issues that this project is going to address, is the fact that, so we have every intention, and here, actually, I'll get a better picture. So basically here we have a view of the historic roof. It's still there. It's very exciting to put your head up there and you're like, oh gosh, this was done in 1845. That's so cool, you know. Would love to bring it back, but the reason they covered it is because it just doesn't work. And it looks great. So, so the intent of this project is to, the second part is basically it appears that there's a bunch of things contributing to the fact that the house has shifted. We know for a fact now, we had a geotech report, that there's a lot of water in the ground. So the settling could have been caused from the wetness of the soil. It could be caused from the overframing. Basically, where these are, basically the house was meant to have a load on the exterior walls, not in interior walls. And so there's a thought that if we remove this overframing and we reinforce the existing roof from below, and then basically put a new roof on it with crickets to basically drain it properly, we can alleviate the load concerns and we can keep the original roof You had a question?
The overframing, so I presume you mean it created more weight.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
More weight, and then weight in places that were being strained by that weight,
Yeah.
essentially. So the intent of this would be to basically redistribute the loads, essentially, and yet keep the historic material. And then we would be doing the work from below, so that we're not going to, the new structure is going to come in and reinforcing existing ceiling joists. So basically, we don't have to rip, because once you touch that ceiling, and it's wonderful that it's been kept for this long. I mean, it's great, because it's in great condition. So basically, there's other issues that need to be addressed, which is basically the porch. One of the reasons we're thinking that there's issues with the front porch is just because there's a lot of settling, which was noted in the preservation plan. It's just settling, and again, we've also known from the geotech report, there's just tons of water in the ground. Anyway, all these are going to be addressed basically in our plans. This is basically just general condition issues. The roof. Here's again the settling, which is going to be seen in a variety of different ways. Which just as the foundation is cracking. You can see the settling here at the back porch. Basically, when one of the things that we're proposing, you can actually see the original siding. When you stand in the attic and you look back at the building, this is the original siding. It was a 6-inch lap siding, a 6-inch exposure. And we would like to, and there's some elements of the still, you could actually see there's some of the siding is still there, and this is the new siding that was put in later, probably to repair siding that was damaged or deteriorated. And we'd like to keep it all in a consistent 6-inch siding, which is essentially what's at the McLaughlin house, correct? Is it the 6-inch siding?
I believe it's
So to kind of keep it with the historic intent.
The white stuff is blown-in insulation, or is it mold, or what is it?
No, that's blown-in insulation.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the other.
Is historic mold.
That is historic mold, and we're not touching it. That's another part of this is since we are going to be doing a lot of replacement of the siding, we have the opportunity to insulate the building, which will make it much more efficient, and it would be kind of a no-brain upgrade. So this basically lists, I just thought I'd put this in, this is from the report, the windows that they were able to, Amy of Oculus Woodworking was able to restore these windows. They're historic, the rest are reconstructed in 1987. So this is a view of the basement, and it's basically, having gone down there and measured it, it's very interesting. Essentially, what this building was, is eventually it was 2, I think, 6x8 hand-hewed beams that spanned from here, and then the floor joists basically were cut into it. You can actually see that hand-hewn beam, and then a pocket beam, and then they put the floor joist into it. And this, you can actually see, is just the other side, and it was meant to basically span to a beam that most likely, for the Hudson's Bay, it kind of was a common practice to basically construct, basically they just put a huge sill on the ground, and at Hudson's Bay it was the Canadian style of building, and they would put these big posts. This is more balloon frame, but we have basically these huge beams all the way around, different configurations, different sizes, different ways, who knows why, but of attaching the joists into that. And the reason and then basically this is also I wanted to point out where the wall above is. Obviously that wall did not bump out like that. It's in an odd location. It would not have, what you would have done now is obviously put a foundation underneath that wall. The other reason this is important to note, which was kind of an exciting discovery as we were doing this, was the fact that they most likely cut this opening to put a stair in there. They put a stair in to get into a basement. Now, we don't know when. We're speculating that this main staircase that's here was at one time turned around and enclosed, much like at the Barclay House. I don't know if you've been to the Barclay House. It's enclosed. And this was actually Bill's discovery, the fact that they would have done that basically to keep heat from escaping. It just didn't make sense. And honestly, if you look at this house, basically it's wood studs, and it had boards on the inside, boards on the outside. There was no insulation. This thing leaked, and I mean heat like crazy. So any way they could have conserved heat, they would have, and that would have been enclosing the bottom floors, basically. There's another thing that also guides us to that decision as well. Let me know if I'm going on too long. trying to
We're
go
interested.
fast.
We're
but-
interested.
You can't
Okay,
go on
all
too
right,
long.
okay, I'm trying
Can't
to.
go on too long.
So the other interesting thing too is basically, so here we have the yellow, basically shows us the original configuration house. The other thing that, besides the foundation that reinforces this, up above here, there's a gigantic, as Mark said, like a mishmash of beams. There's like 6 or 7 gigantic beams that span from here to here to hold up the wall above. So at some point, this was bumped out, and most likely, this is a very kind of tight claustrophobic
Small
room.
rooms, yeah.
And they were able to open this up. They were able to put in a nice bookcase and kind of open that up. And again, when this happened, we don't know. But what we do know is at some point that stair was modified quite a bit and flipped around. The joists were, the floor, those big beams were cut open to allow for a stair to go down to the basement. When we initially looked at this building, the wallpaper was off at this one portion to the left, basically. It's this beautiful tongue and groove siding. It was very carefully done. It was really nicely beaded. And we were like, oh, gosh, this was what they'd wanted. It was exposed. It was never wallpapered. And the ceiling is the same configuration, very tightly constructed with the bead along the bottom. And so we decided to take the wallpaper off just to get a better look to see how much of it, so we can actually, for pricing, how much do we need to reconstruct. Well, it turns out that, there was almost, to my mind, almost no rhyme or reason. Obviously, there's rhyme or reason, but, it's these, it looks like they may have, taken apart a barn and used the materials, because what's weird is that, it's stained. In this wall over here, come on, Arrow, is all green and stained. Here we have the beadboard, or no beading on the wall or ceiling, but the ceilings are beaded. Then we have the beadboard ceiling here, but then we have these boards that don't have the bead on the bottom, but it's stained. At some point it was exposed. There's no question. Was it exposed in this building? We just don't know.
Right.
Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Was this could have very well been taken off another building, and they just said, hey, we're going to reuse it. Oh, we ran out. Or
Right.
maybe it was all beautiful, and then somebody wanted it for something else and took it. And then, again, these are answers we're not going to get unless we're able to find them written in some place, and we haven't. So this is basically the sitting room, and I guess I just put these on here for you guys to see. Every single room is a little bit different. Here we have, again, this beaded side. You see a lot of the water damage, most likely from before the move. This is where it had been infilled. This is basically the dining room looking west. So you're looking at that. You're basically looking at the side that we had looked at when it was moved in 1987, and there was basically a double window here, and there was a door here, and so it was basically infilled when it was restored in 1987. This is just a view of the workroom, just for you guys to see. Really, you can see that the interior is definitely a little bit different. It's smaller boards. We know that's a different construction. It may be a similar framing, but it was definitely finished at a different time. This is, again, going back to the staircase. We know that this door was removed at some point. You can actually see it was cut through and there was some sort of beam put in here. And we're thinking when this door was reversed, in order to get this door to swing properly, they may have moved it over a little bit. And this here is a really telling point as to, basically another point that proves this theory that the stair was enclosed and turned around. When Mark did the original structural this analysis of this building, they went out there that basically this beam basically cantilevers out to here, and this beam and the beam above us was meant to frame into a wall. Because what it's doing now, these 3 beams are actually cantilevered off this 1.5-inch really thin panel, which is a dividing wall. It's carrying all the loads of the floor above. This one here, we just discovered when we were out last, they basically have a ledger, and this is hanging off this partition wall, and it's bearing on, we don't know. It was meant to, yeah, it's, habit is what's keeping it up pretty much. And
I love it.
And so this is definitely something that needs to be addressed structurally. And again, it's just another telling sign that there was something else going on here. Second floor, little bit more straightforward in the sense, not as big changes. Obviously, the staircase, and you'll see in a second that's something you can see the changes. You could see this door was put in much later. Most likely, this you can see in the ceiling. This is where a wall was. Was that the original location? We don't know. Most likely, the board and batten was done later, and most likely because the wall came up here and they had to redo this whole ceiling. The tongue and groove is much more of the period. The Hudson's Bay, there's documentation that most of the ceilings were tongue and groove. It wasn't board and bat. Board and bat would have come later. Again, so this is the one wall, basically on the west side of the corridor, and this is on the east side of the corridor. Same thing. It was moved. It would have never, at some point a wall came to this point and the ceiling, or the ceiling hit at this point. Wall was moved over. We don't know why. Maybe they wanted to enlarge the room. Same thing as far as the boards on the interior is basically a little bit of everything. Some of it's colored, some isn't. Some have these almost, I would say, a half-inch gap, which you have to, again, remember that all they had on the exterior were boards, were siding, and it was basically open to the breezes. This was kind of a neat find when we took the wallpaper off, is there's an access hatch to go into the old attic, and maybe they used it to store things in there. So another reason why we know that at some point that was much lower. Let's see, again, this is the nursery. The nursery is one of the more original buildings, part of the building when it comes to the trim, comes to the door, the hardware, the windows, and again, this is where we find some more of this beaded, board siding. Master bedroom, again, that's a little bit of everything. And again, the hardware, what's original? This, for example, is the front door hardware. It's a mortise lock. They would have done, again, at the time, it was much easier to surface mount the hardware than to mortise it into the door. And I were doing work on the Portland Union Station, and I was looking for information on the oldest hardware type, which is actually this Corbin hardware. And when I came and saw the building, it was like, oh, so this is new to this building, and it was old to Union Station. It was just kind of neat. And this is a catalog cut. Isn't that neat? I thought that was kind of neat. And
That is great.
And it's a catalog cut, and from the time, and that's what it looked like. So again, this front door most likely was added later. Probably, again, it's not recently later, but later. Anyway, surface mounted. This would be probably a more historic. You can see this crazing, which is basically the porcelain. It's cracking. You can kind of see the patina of the steel. This is a new door handle. It's a reproduction, most likely put on in the 1987. Again, we have a source here that can tell us for sure. The doors are a little bit of everything. Again, we can actually, and this is 30%. We haven't taken it to that level. For example, as far as the doors go and dating, for example, the hinges, you can actually take these screws, take them out and date the screws. For the boards on the interior, you can actually tell from the type of nails used approximately what era it was installed. Just another level. It's more time, it's more research, but it's all there, and it all has a story. It's just a matter of documenting it kind of religiously and very carefully. Back to the doors. For the most part, the doors are 4-panel doors. Again, you can see the molding here is different than the molding here. Some of the condition issues, some vertical cracking. All the doors and all the hardware, for the most part, were in good condition. Minor repairs, nothing was, you can see a lot worse. And it's also on the inside. Again, another example of a surface-mounted, another strange door configuration, sort of 5 recessed panels. There's 3 doors like this. These were the most typical condition where it was just a very simple 4-panel, and it seemed that these doors were the ones that had the most historic hardware on them. So that's as far as the background goes.
Very nice.
And so I'm wondering, should I kind of run through our approach now?
Yes.
Okay, so the approach. Basically, you've also seen our preservation plans, which you've seen. And again, going back to, what do we restore this building to? It's a big question. It's an important question for a lot of reasons, just because of the historical importance of this building. And so we stated, usually when you do an HSR, you say the period of significance is from, 1990 to 1920. And in this case, we said, well, why is this building significant? We said this building is significant because of these three: when it was constructed, who lived in it, and who was it constructed by. And we're saying that the period of significance is roughly 1845 or 1844, whenever there's to 1846. So we have information now that we've gathered that confirms that. We know that the stair was turned around at some point. We know the addition was modified. And then we have other areas that need to be addressed. For example, the roof needs to be reinforced. The foundation is settling. We've done a geotech investigation. We know we can drain the soils in a certain way. We can put in a new foundation, a full height foundation, which programmatically would have great benefits. They can store things down there. And so what we're saying is we're going to take this building back to 1845 as closely as we can. And when I say that, that's what we said for 30%. We're planning to meet with the SHPO. We're planning to meet with the, what are they called again? The Historic Preservation League, to get consensus. Again, this is not our building, it's everybody's building, and it's history's building, and we want to do the right thing. And I think it needs more than just, if we had all this documentation, it would be a no-brainer, but we don't. We just have a few hazy photographs. This is the intent. We're going to get more input. And essentially what that would mean is basically we're putting in a full height foundation. Again, that's just a good thing, and we would do it in such a way we'd like to put a veneer similar to what was done at the McLaughlin House, where they put veneer so it looks like it's stone from the exterior. It's only going to be, I don't know, 2 feet high, so it's not like it's going to be a noticeable change to the building. And essentially the exterior would be the same. The window's not part of our scope of work. That would be put back into a building that's plumb, and we could put the windows and all the trim associated with that would go back into place. I think that part of the scope of work was to reconstruct a couple windows, which is done already. The other big thing that we would do is turn the stair around. That's basically, it's one, we have hard facts that can basically confirms that this was what was there originally, and it would greatly solve a structural problem, which is we have to deal with the loads in this area. And we can draw on the other contemporary houses of this period that have a similar configuration. We'd also have to address ADA, which basically, because it's a historic house, we don't have to put an elevator to get people in on the second floor, which might be expected of other public buildings. Again, the use being assumed that it's going to be a house museum, and that's what we're saying is going to happen. And so basically we are able to make it accessible. We'd have to put, for example, offset hinges. Basically you put a hinge on the door, you can keep the historic door, but it would offset so the doors could have the 32-inch minimum clearance required. And we could basically designate what we would call an ADA path to get through the building. We would be able to make this building, the bathroom, accessible with minimal invasion. We'd have to remove the bathtub. But these are things that if we are to open this building to the public, we don't have a choice. It's not like we can say we'd like to keep certain people out because it would affect our building. And on the flip side, too, it's the Barclay House and McLaughlin House are not ADA accessible. So as far as a house museum that would be accessible to all, this would be the one, basically, that everybody could get to, which would be, to me, a great benefit. And there would have to be, we just would have to make some changes like that. Basically, the second floor would be minimally changed. We would basically move the wall back to its original location to where for it to line up with the ceiling above. We would put in a full height. Again, this is 30%. These are very, very schematic plans as to what we're doing. We'd have to rebuild the roof structure so that it drains properly. It'd have to rebuild anyway because it's settled to such an extent. And another big change is we're proposing to bring the roof back to what it would have been like in 1845, or as close as possible. We wouldn't actually remove the bathroom and the kitchen areas. I mean, we wouldn't go to that extent. Basically, this is the elevation. The roof line would be lowered. And essentially what you'd be seeing, we are proposing putting shutters back to make it look more similar to the 1890 appearance. And we'd also have to introduce a handicap ramp, which we put a couple schemes. We need to have an associated van parking. It'd have to be van. If it's a single space, it has to be van accessible. We have to find van accessible parking. All of these are much bigger questions than we can address tonight, and it's just basically we're exploring what's the best way to do it. There's a variety of different ways to basically get into this house with the ramp, and of course, how can we do it, make it as attractive, least intrusive, welcoming. That is a project unto itself. And those are the structural drawings. And then basically the last thing I wanted to basically call up is basically we had the 30%. We're sort of saying this is what we're doing. And we handed it to the cost estimator, and this is the number that he generated essentially based on. And again, this is not, it's basically the construction costs. And it wouldn't include mechanical, electrical, which would be a different scope. But anyway, to be able to compare to the preservation plan. And
I was pleased to see the cost estimate because actually, initially, there were kind of two things proposed. One is to basically put kind of a new structural form on it and then put the siding back. The other, and of course, I think it depended on what the settling issues were and why they were, versus going ahead and trying to use all the material that's there. And I think we were given actually a range that was given to us was quite a bit higher than this. I think it went up to 700,000 or something like that.
This doesn't include what now?
These are the
mechanical,
construction-
electrical is not included, and the windows have already been redone,
Yeah.
which is not an insignificant
We also have
cost.
to factor in on top of this is just a construction cost estimate. The architect and their team, their costs are above and beyond this.
Yeah.
So by the time it's all said and done, if this number stays pretty close, and again, remind you that this is by all means, this is not a final number. This is a 30% completion
Right.
cost estimate of from the information they have available right at this point. It probably, I don't think it'll fluctuate greatly, but it could. But we do have some other costs, such as the architectural and engineering costs and some things. So but the good news is it looks like we're within that target number that we've been talking about based on the 2002 restoration plan. That's kind of, we've had to use an older number, and we were hoping that number hadn't greatly inflated, and so far it looks pretty good for us here. So.
Scott, something I didn't see in this is mitigating what's causing a problem anyway, the water and the groundwater stuff around there.
Well, basically, again, there's a lot of water in the foundation, and the intent with the foundation, full-height foundation with concrete walls, and also we would be draining the water essentially with the pump, and ultimately the groundwater is basically 8 feet. So actually, it's really only very bad when there's huge flooding, for example, and that would impact the foundation. And additionally, which I didn't mention, is that when basically this was put into basically this house was moved, there was a fire station or a police station in this location with a full height foundation. And when it was moved, it was infilled, and and basically, and you can correct me if there's any more up-to-date information from the geotech report, but essentially it was infilled, and there's thoughts also that infill wasn't compacted properly and may also be contributing to the settling. So it's not just the water, it's also this fill, which would be removed for this full height foundation.
And that's
completely
included in
removed.
this?
That's included in that, correct. That's a good question.
Because there was so much uncertainty about the addition and the changes of the addition, can you expand on what you're thinking about? And maybe you said it, but I kind of missed it.
As far as
As how it gets preserved and what is done.
so
You're saying you're
again-
trying to go back to 1845s to the great extent possible, but there are some real questions about the nature of the addition
Well,
and so on.
It is, and I think what we'd like to do is do a little more investigation to really determine how much of that framing is original, which we can because there's consistency as to how the construction details, which we're able to see. So it would be just basically doing some removals at the attic level. We just talked about this last week. So we're kind of doing this as we go, too, because we keep discovering things. If that's the case, then we can determine that framing was original. We can say that basically it's lowering the roof. Which wouldn't be a huge impact, and that space, while it is somewhat usable, it's not a very great space, and we could make up for that with this new foundation that's going in. But before we make that final decision, we definitely want to do some more investigation, document the framing a little bit better before we go full throttle down that road. Again, looking at the earlier photographs from the exterior, we're also concerned that the way that roof was put on there, it may not be structurally sound, the way it's connected. So if we bring that roof down, it would also address certain structural issues. And to be investigated, and for 30%, that's the way we're going. And we'll have more information when we meet next.
I have a question. I thought I read in here that the basement was going to be redone for possible programming, or is that included in the estimate?
It is included. The full height foundation, so the drawings that I included basically included a full height foundation, and essentially the other advantage to that is all the mechanical equipment right now is just really hard to access. And so it would give you a full room for mechanical, electrical, and it would also offer storage space to put stuff in there.
Nice.
And it would be...
Takes care of all the water issues.
Exactly.
And gets it up.
Exactly.
Good.
It's a lot of information, and I could go on all night, but I won't.
I could too. I'm just thinking, this is amazing. And I want to spend, multiple more hours going through it again. I'm really excited by this, but it also brings up questions that I never thought I'd be thinking about in terms of. Well, I guess I always knew that the dining room went beyond the original part, and so we're talking about the possibility of restoring the house. Obviously, those moves were made for a reason, and you think about how you use that dining room for an event if that shrinks 4 feet, and especially where some of these walls have been moved. They're used, in the past of how the house was used as a museum. That was, I think, those spaces were somewhat crucial. So it's a trade-off to some degree, and if you're gaining space in the basement, maybe that trade-off is very worth it to get it back to its original state, which in a lot of ways I think it would.
Now, the bump out, correct me if I'm wrong, that stays. The roof height comes down.
No, it wouldn't affect the dining room at all.
Okay, so you would envision
That
keeping
would-
that.
I believe
Because
so.
from the outside,
You probably
from
need
the
to come
outside,
to the mic.
it's not really noticeable.
Oh,
From the outside, it's not really noticeable, and then even on the inside, if people aren't really specifically looking for it, they wouldn't necessarily know that room went beyond.
no.
I think the dining room was a very important part of their lives, so it was bigger. It was a small house, a big dining room in a small house. But if, in fact, this famous coin toss took place there, obviously they're around a table, and you put a table in that room, and it's just about right for a meal and tossing the coin. So, if that is true, and I'd like to believe it's true, and I want to believe it's true, it certainly ties Portland to Oregon City innately.
We should
Absolutely.
we should have a proclamation that say it's true.
Right now, right now.
You can make that happen.
Don't ask for witnesses, just do it.
Everyone in this room knows it's true. That's all that matters.
That's all that matters. Right.
So I think that, ideally, I think that space is important. But, when we go back, there's a lot of questions I think to still be answered. But one of the things I didn't even think about was the ceiling on the addition, but it's obvious now when you see it how it affects the structure of the original house and how it wouldn't have really jeopardized that edge or the framing on the upper part of the house. Yeah. Thank
One
you.
theory is the original wing, I'd call it, was the dining room and the kitchen right behind it. That had a nice pitched roof over it, hip roof over it. Not hipped, what am I saying? Gabled.
Gable.
Well, gable-ended. And then they expanded it, possibly, this is a theory, to include what's now a little kitchen and a bathroom. Then they upped the roof over that, and then at some point they wanted an attic, so they upped the whole thing over that. So at what point you say, if Ermatinger is this marvelous figure who kind of came out here with McLaughlin and trudged his way across the country umpteen thousand times, Herculean capacities to do all these things, Chief Schrader, quite an interesting guy. If this is his house, and he spanned from the original time when McLaughlin came out, Fort George, came with them to the new building of the fort and the founding of Oregon City, that is a fulsome segment of all of our history. And that is why it's so intriguing to everybody, and that's why so many people have made big efforts with this house. It's extremely important.
Going back to the addition, because we have the oldest pictures, it seems 1857, and it is the one from that blow up. So even in the original photograph, that addition is not necessarily that noticeable. When you look at the McLaughlin house and even the Barclay house, typically the kitchen and the bath, weren't attached to the house. So we at least know that there was an addition there in 1857. I don't necessarily know that was there when the house was completely. I don't know if it's original to the 1845. So that's a question too. Why would they have built Why would that kitchen have been attached from the original part of the house, or if it came even the 10 years later? I'm not sure. Because none of those other houses.
We could have a joint sleuthing session.
Right.
Weigh the
so that's
alternatives.
a neat question.
It's fun.
The flooring in the lower part of the house, for the most part, we think that's original?
Well, clearly the flooring on the right-hand side, on the east side, is added on top of the original flooring.
On the parlor.
But if you really look at the old flooring in the old part of the house, untouched, there are a lot of arguments to say it was always there. The cutout for a fireplace chimney has intrigued us. Was there a fireplace? Was there not a fireplace? How would they have gotten heat if they didn't have one?
Well, then we know that there was a chimney there.
Right.
And we see a chimney.
Something there.
So if you look at the cutout and you look at the age of the flooring from below, and I must say, Maya, I give her great credit. She crawled much further than an old guy like me could crawl. About that much clearance total. A lot of old structure is really down there, and there's a lot of stories in it.
Yeah, well, some of these photos
Good
of just the wallpaper being torn back and seeing what you found underneath it, and incredible. It's really incredible. All right, well, I'm gonna, just kind of have to take all this in. It's amazing, and I'm so excited that we're at this point. I guess I'd like to know what the next step is I guess to go deeper into this process, and I definitely would like to be a little bit more involved as we go forward into the design parts of it, and what the future use of the house is, and those kind of questions as it comes up. With the ADA and all that, I think there's a lot of really great scenarios and ways to make that work. I don't know that I've ever taken a bath in the Ermatinger house, Marge. Have you?
Not too many.
So I think the bathtub disappearing is not a big deal. So when we get down to those kind of discussions, I would love to be a part of helping with some of that, because this is a house that I've spent a long time attached to, and have been working on for 15, 20 years, and definitely there are people in this room that have a huge interest in making this right and making it perfect. So I just thank you so much for the work. I don't want to start going into any details because it's too much. So I want to let it set in, kind of make some notes and stuff about it, and come back to it. But I feel, at every step of this process in the last couple of years, each time I feel more and more at ease that it's being done right. And the depth at which you're going to looking at these things and answering these questions makes me feel comfortable, and it makes me excited about seeing this project finished at some point in hopefully the near future. So thank you all so much for this work.
Commissioner Ross?
Thank you.
Rocky brought up about the bathroom. I have a question. That's not going to be a working bathroom, is it?
It would be, it would have new fixtures in it, however, that are ADA compliant, essentially, and it would be for the visitors and the staff.
Okay.
He's mentioning a lot of people in this room are interested. I'd like to add another
Yeah.
10 minutes to our discussion if there are any, I mean, if anybody has
Yeah, I'd
some
like to hear
questions from,
Yeah.
because we got a lot of people I know are probably here for this particular topic. If anybody has some questions, please come on forward. No,
And
don't be shy, but I know better than say
Yeah.
that about Marge. But
and not just questions. I would like to hear
Okay, yeah, questions,
what you
comments,
think
sure.
about this.
Comments.
If you've been able to look at this and
yeah, you stay. Stay right where we are.
I'd be happy to.
No.
Marge Harding. I don't know if anyone has more of a passion. Listen to me. You can hear it in my voice for this place than Rolla, my husband, and I do. And of course, Rocky got us started. But one of the things that I have a question about is, this is just a comment and a question. I have a very definite opinion that the house was built actually in 43, not 45, because he was living in it, according to his letters, in April of 44. And the other things that were happening, it computes to 43 rather than to 45. He was getting ready to leave Oregon City, actually, in 45. So that does not compute with me. My question is, have you looked at the two older houses in Oregon, which is Jason Lee's house and the parsonage at Willamette Mission? Have you compared by any chance, I'm just curious, is there any comparison as far as the structures of those houses and this house?
Do you want to switch seats here? Because I think you...
Okay, come on up, please.
No.
Keep you moving.
Well, being a historian and an architect, I have a huge notebook of all the Greek Revival houses. Of course, this is the third oldest one in my list, but there are 6 or 7 others in the 1840s in the state, and some have disappeared. But in going around to seeing them all, I've taken sketches on anything that might be pertinent. Not the most in-depth, I must say, but things that look very obvious. How did they do the stairs? How did they do the windows? What was their siding? What were their footings? Little notes, little sketches, and I put them all in the notebook. So anything that has come up on this house that is pertinent has been referenced by looking at those other houses of this vintage. And there's very, very few of them.
Add back in my seat again.
Yeah.
That again, this house was constructed by the Fort Vancouver employees, so that would also have a different, perhaps, way of constructing than your average other houses. So we have done a lot of, we looked at McLaughlin and Barclay very carefully, and actually the Park Service, we've gone, they have an not an archive, but a library that kind of talks about the construction types, and we did look at that as well. Even though there it's a very distinct Canadian construction that does not translate directly to this house, to the Mergner house.
I happen to concur with Marge. There's no reason to the contrary why it isn't an 1843 house. I haven't seen anything. And there is an 1844 letter in his wonderful book, all his letters that he wrote to his brother, that talks about a dinner party in 44. So in my house, something like that.
Right.
So that's quite a fact. He had a child the year before, and there was a lot of pressure at the old fort a lot of pressure on everybody. McLaughlin was under huge strain, and so was Ermatinger. To go to Oregon City, I mean, to change one's whole allegiance from Hudson Bay Company to, oh my gosh, look at all these Yankees coming, aren't they fun? And they also want the land in Oregon City. The history gets a little interesting there. But they had to make a decision, a very hard one. McLaughlin chose to become a U.S. citizen and is the father of Oregon. I believe we're all consensus about this. Ermatinger had huge struggles, absolutely huge struggles. He had ordered a whole house load of furniture, a lot of money at the time, for his new home, for his bride, really upgrading. They had McLaughlin, who had a wonderful home, wonderful furnishings, all imported. There was a little pressure to settle down. He was a traveler, just a tremendous guy who was on the move all the time. Huge conflicts with Hudson Bay, and obviously he was going to settle here. He was going to have a store. It was going to be a McLaughlin store, which he purchased from Hudson Bay, and the Yankees were getting a store. I mean, he was going to make a life here. But all these debts that he had, the only way to pay them off was to be a good employee of the company, go back to this isolated fort where he retired, and that's where he died.
Thank you again.
Sorry
And
to dilate a bit.
No, I
love the history.
Marge almost started crying too, and I'll do the same if I say too much. But just answering that question, you guys, you know what you're doing, and it's obvious that you have a passion for it and the history in this house, and I can't feel better about where we're at, and I'm so excited about it, and thank you so much.
Yes, thank
Any
you.
other
guys.
any other comments or questions from anybody out there? If not, we'll go ahead and proceed on. And thank you.
That's great.
You're doing a wonderful thing.
Yeah, this is great.
Pay attention to that.
Thank you.
We're committed, and anybody that follows us should.
Basic
we have to
roots.
wait that long. We'll be committed, I'm sure.
Committed.
Thank you, Maya.
We're crazy about this house.
Okay, with that, we're going to go on to the next agenda item. The end of the Oregon Trail discussion, and again, Mr. Archer.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. The objective with this discussion about the end of the Oregon Trail site tonight is that we've been talking about this off and on for a while, and you've stated in your goals for this year that you would like to address the site and at least try to get to some decision making about what the future of the end of the Oregon Trail site is. So our objective tonight is to have some discussion with you and to hopefully get your sense of direction or a good firm direction from you as to where you'd like to go, how you'd like to continue the conversation, or whatever it is that you're wanting to do. So I just want to kind of introduce a little bit of background. This might be a little bit repetitive, but at least I think it's worth just kind of going over a snapshot of the history here, and then let you ask the questions that you want to ask or have the conversation that you want to have. As you know, the city has been essentially operating the site since 2009 when it closed. As the owner of the site, we are responsible for all the maintenance, including the grounds and the buildings. So even though other than the visitor center, now the visitor center, the Visitors Information Center, the VIC, has remained open continuously, even with the closure of the interpretive buildings. Again, a reminder about that. The relationship there is that this is a state/county tourism visitor center. It's funded by tourism dollars. The county, Clackamas County, actually operates the visitor center, and they do that with an agreement. Right now, that agreement is with CHP, who have worked with the county to provide that service. So the visitor center has been open contiguously. But the city has has maintained basically everything on the site, and we continue to do that. In 2010, following the closure, the City Commission enacted a citizens task force and a consultant group to bring forward a report about the site. That was completed with the Citizen Task Force and AMS Planning and Research. We've talked about that in depth before. I've also included that in my staff report to you. I know you've got that report, so we're not going to go through that. But basically, there are three major takeaways from that report, as I see it, and that we've talked about. And those three are: one, continuing the operations of the Visitors Information Center. I think that's been a common goal of the Commission and of the community. I think people want to see that continue. Number two is development of a heritage park, and within that, to create self-guided interpretation opportunities. So this is the end of the Oregon Trail. It should be. The idea is that, according to the report, is that it should be something that somebody could come visit and not have to rely on paying an admission fee to come through a gate or through a door. But there should be at least some level of self-interpretation available, so that people that want to learn about and visit the end of the Oregon Trail can do so. And thirdly, the recommendation is that we should look at enhancing the site as use it as a festival and events venue, and I think it kind of lends itself to that in some ways already, but to enhance that. So those were the major outcomes of the vision, what is called the End of the Oregon Trail Vision and Planning Study. Last year, the Commission in 2011, the Commission had other priorities and said we'd like to wait on making a decision until next year. So in your 2012 goal setting, you kind of reaffirmed that you want to work on this year, and so that's why we're back here now. At the beginning of the calendar year, and in January, Clackamas Heritage Partners came forward and requested your support of application for a grant to do some expanded programming and events and things of that nature. And you did support that. So CHP went on and applied for that grant, and they have received a grant in the amount of, I believe, about $81,000. There are, I know we have representatives from CHP here tonight. I'll leave it to the Commission to determine how you want to discuss that. If you would like them to present that information, I've forwarded their proposal to you in your packet, of course, and you've got that. The other piece of that is that at that meeting, that discussion in January, you asked that staff would work with them to determine use of some of those funds, potentially to reinvest back into some of the deferred maintenance, and we have done that. We've had those continued discussions, so that's been part of our continuing discussion. Essentially, that's a really quick snapshot of kind of since the interpretive center closed, where we're at right now. I'd like to turn it over to you, commissioners, to determine how you want to go forward with this discussion. But again, the main objective here is that we'd like to seek your directions. Staff would like to know where you would like us to go with this from here.
Who wants to launch into this? I think we probably all have some words to say. But while Rocky's making some notes there, Commissioner Smith, one of the things that I think pushes us a little faster on this is the OCTA having its program here next year, and I think there's a general feeling that we would like, to the extent possible, to have that the End of the Oregon Interpretive Center available to those people that are coming. Mm-hmm. And how that's done, I don't know, but that's not intended to be the end goal. I think it's a stimulating on our part to have this happen. I can't remember. I think it may have been, I don't know, it was Mr. Miles there when we were working together and the facility was open, but there was the the canopy, the canvas had deteriorated, and somebody made the comment anyway that that may have been more like the wagons looked like when they got to Oregon City. I mean, I've heard all kinds of positive and negative comments about the hoops and so forth, but the point is, I do think they're a very visible component, and from my standpoint, although I think there were greater visions of what would happen there, and I've heard that that was intended to be a temporary facility, the fact is, people know about them positively or negatively. They're still there, and I would like to see those hoops as part of whatever's there. Now that doesn't mean the structure, the internal structure, and so forth needs to be the same, but they're part of the history. They're part of the history of that particular development at that site. But I think they're also something that really that used to catch the eyes of people going down 205 and so forth. So that's just my opinion. Have you finished your notes?
It's like the previous topic. It could go on for 3 more weeks and 24 hours a day, and it wouldn't be done. These are huge. I mean, these are huge projects and things to tackle. Were you? I didn't have signed up officially yet, so if someone else has signed up, I guess.
Go ahead, you're on.
Okay, I'm on there. So, you know, as most of you all know, I worked there from the day it opened for about, I think I worked there 3 years. Then I moved to the Ermatinger House. And so it's kind of interesting to have both these things on the topic tonight because these are the 2 places that I kind of started my interest in Oregon City's history and my connection to why I'm even doing this today. As on the city commission, so it's kind of come full circle. The interpretive center meant so much to all of us when it opened, and in fact, Raul and Marge were very connected with the interpretive center, and that's how I met them, how I got them connected with the Ermatinger House. So it really is amazing to see this all come back again. But in a lot of ways, I see we're kind of in the same place. That we have learned some lessons over the last 15 years. We also haven't learned some. And I am very cautious about how we move forward with this building because of a couple key questions. But at the same time, I'm really excited about the opportunity to be able to fix something that was not working, and make that site the place that we'd always envisioned it being, and that's not easy. I think we were all extremely disappointed in terms of how the museum was closed and in what way it was closed without us really even knowing it. And I think that it's a huge step to go back into any partnership unless it's extremely specified with a partner who basically failed us. And so but at the same time, I've seen a lot of progress. And so that is why when Dan and both Gail were interested in going for this grant, the Lennox grant, I very much wanted to support it. But at that time that they were going to get that grant, we hadn't really, as a commission, agreed on a vision for that building yet. And so it was kind of how are we going to support a grant that definitely ties to our building and CHP when we don't even know what the future of it is. And so that was the stumbling block that I felt like I had to tackle in a 2-week time frame. And so with my conversation with both Gail and Dan, said, you know, the way that we have to go about this, in my mind, is, you know, this, you know, how will the city commission support this this grant? And the key things that I remember when we showed our support to move forward on the Lennox grant was that we as a commission were very supportive of what what CHP is doing currently within the confines of the visitor center, and that we had, you know, no problem with that continuing. We talked about the need for this added attraction, I guess, in the sense that these people are coming every day. You know, every time I'm in a meeting down there, it just makes you sick because people want to get in the building, and so, you know, that weighs on all of us every day. So how do we allow that building to be used in some way so it's just not sitting there? And for me, I didn't see a problem if we knew specific groups were coming into Oregon City, like the Octa event, which may or may not use that building for a day or two, or any other big, large group tour that's coming into Oregon City that we can plan for, and where CHP can work in conjunction with Scott to utilize that building for a group tour. Great. And so that was one of the things that we all said at that meeting too, that we had no problem letting CHP utilize that building in a little bit more of a way than they are now, if it was clear that it was the city still managing the building in a sense, and that they were using it for specific group tours. And if some of that money went back into helping some of the problems with the structure of the wagon buildings itself. But we also made it clear at that point we weren't ready to have any real discussion on what the future management of that building was going to be, what the future use of that building was going to be, any of those things. And so that is kind of the way that meeting went. So both Gail and Nan went forward. They applied for the Lennox Foundation grant. They were awarded it, which I think we're all really excited about. And but at the same time as being extremely excited about it, a day or so following that, an extremely extensive press release went out that concerned me greatly. Because the press release was a little broader than what I just laid out. The press release implied that essentially the museum was going to be reopened and that the theater was going to be used and that some of these other parts of the building were going to be used, which is not anything that the commission has ever agreed to or talked about. And so I felt that press release was misleading. And the reason that bothers me is because it puts us in a position where now we have $80,000 to, CHP has $80,000 to continue their programming, and I can't imagine that the Lennox Foundation would grant $80,000 if they knew that CHP wasn't going to be allowed to use the wagon buildings. And they haven't really been allowed to use them. And so does that jeopardize the $80,000, or can they still follow through with their plans and utilize that in every way that they stated before, which was possibly doing the movie? I mean, all these topics were brought up, so this is not new. I mean, we talked about if they got the grant that maybe the movie presentation would somehow be configured in the visitor center, but never was it talked about using the middle wagon building. I think the possibilities of an interpretive walking around the site, the grounds, the signage, the garden, not only does it resolve the problem that we have with visitors wanting to have an explanation on things that are on that site, but it also goes back to the AMS report that says, we need to develop this heritage park. It's going to be a long time till we, as a city, probably decide what every detail of that site's going to be used for. And right now, that land, it'd be great to have visitors be able to come in, get a device that can take them around the property and teach that history. And so, to me, that's a non-issue. What's going to be the real challenge is if that grant is specifically about reopening the museum or reopening the theater, and who is managing the building. And that's when we get into some real problems. And so I'm really torn on how to support CHP in this process to continue their programming, but at the same time, and I'll be honest, most of you know this, I would have been okay with CHP completely disbanding and being done and reformed at some point. But I don't think that's happened, and I see there's progress being made, and so I kind of step back on that viewpoint. But I'm also, at the same time, not ready to take that extra step to hand a building back to an organization that still is operating, for the most part, under the same board. For the most part, it's still operating under the same leadership that caused the problems in the first place. And it's going to take a lot to get to that point to let them operate the building again. In addition to that, there's not a whole lot of other people in town that'll do it. So, how do you tackle that problem? Assuming that there was a whole list of people, and I think a lot of us say, well, no one else out there will do it. Although when we went through the process of this community process, there was a whole lot of other groups that had very much interest in that building. So I think they are out there, and I think they've just gone away because they haven't seen us move forward, and they've disappeared. So I think there is the ability to kind of bring a collaboration of people together to move that building forward. At any rate, if we get into a discussion about CHP managing that building in the future, and I won't, at this point I can say I'm almost opposed to it, but I'm willing to work through that process. I could see it working, but it sure as heck wouldn't be the way it was. It would have to be extremely detailed in this agreement between us and CHP and how the building is operated, and there would have to be it would just have to be very specific, and it could take a long time, I think, to get to a place where we are with that. And I don't know that can be done in the time it would take to fulfill a grant if the grant is tied to the theater building. Anyway, I'll leave it at that for now. I'm sure that'll bring a whole lot of other discussions up, and then we'll see where that goes.
Commissioner Pauly.
I would like to hear the specific plans of CHP and the ideas they have to bring forward to this.
I think, go ahead.
Attachment?
It's the attachment. But can you explain about the grant?
Yes.
I think that was
That's
probably
the- that's
that
the
was
big
the
question.
probably the big question, the grant, how it'll be implemented and so forth. I've not been as close to this as Commissioner Smith has, but a lot of the concerns that he brought in, I actually share because I was on the commission at the time. The CHP closed, and in fact, we didn't know it was going to happen until maybe the weekend before or something like that. And so I have the same kinds of concerns that share some of those concerns that Commissioner Smith has. With that,
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, Dan Fowler, thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. It's not the way it was.
you mean you were not the way it was.
The organization is not the way it was.
Okay.
The operation is not the way it was, and I don't want to dwell on the past. I want to hear, and I hopefully gain support for what we as a community and you as elected leaders want to have happen down there. And quite frankly, I'm not interested in dwelling on the past. I want the place opened. There's never been an intent to mislead. The grant was put forth. We brought forth all the details of that grant and was seeking permission to do a number of things. And if we're going to open for groups, the groups are going to be in the middle wagon. We've been working really closely with city staff. And I think one of the things that I wrestle with is, and I know that we all have a love for that place. We really do. And it's really amazing because I was just sitting here thinking about the Ermitinger House and how so many things are intertwined. And to have the privilege to work on things like that with Mrs. Powers when she was alive, and here we are at the same night. I mean, some of the same things that Rocky spoke about. But one of the things that I thought Scott was going to mention, and did you share with them the maintenance report that we got on the building from Ann and Denise?
No, we didn't get into that level.
Okay.
I didn't know the commission wanted to go with all that.
Well, I think it has a real bearing because I think we have the impression those buildings are about ready to fall down, and they're not. And I think it's a major, major issue when we did the community report that fired up the community. And I'm all for the ideas of 24/7 signage, event space, greater interpretation around the site. I mean, that's right on the money. All that is part of the grant and part of the things that we can move forward. We've already had a wonderful meeting with over 18 people came, and we did so many things about improving signage down there in terms of a walkthrough. But some of the most exciting things that are going on is Denise and Ann with the city and Scott have been working so hard to manage a facility that the city owns, and we do not want to manage the facility. I want to really make that clear. We are not here seeking management of the facility at all. The way it is being managed under the Parks Department is absolutely the way it should be. What we would like to have is a cooperative agreement to operate in there under the restrictions and guidelines that the city parks director may put on us. And I think those are the kind of things that I would hope that we could work out and he could bring back to you as a commission to make sure that you approve. We do not want to manage the site. But the maintenance, we heard figures of maybe $100,000 to fix the HVAC system. And the latest figure is less than $2 million. We heard that the roof was shot, and again, I'm not laying fault or blame. It was not, I'm not trying to make anybody look bad, but the roof was in really bad repair, rot, and it needed to be cleaned and maintained. And yes, there's a couple of issues, there's some things that need to be done, but it's a few $1,000s. It's not 30 or 40. There's life left in it. Some of the major things that are left are really the siding issues. There's some rot issues on siding. It really needs to be addressed. Working cooperative, and we've brainstormed on this. What we need for you guys is to let your staff loose to work and to have ideas come back. We want to work with the Parks Department because as a nonprofit and as a city, we can team up, and if we have positive direction given from you, we can not only fulfill Lennox, we can go to the Home Depot of the world who wants to take on a project and have siding replaced down there. We can team up and do those kind of things as a nonprofit. So the opportunities are there to work together if we just trust each other a little bit again. Because it's different. So, but I really believe, and I'll let Gail maybe speak, and Randy's here that could speak to the signage and some of the specifics on the grant. But what I would encourage you guys to think about, is because it's what we think about every day down there, is the visitor. They're coming. Our numbers are up 70%. It's like they're coming, and it's sad that we can't be open. And what we put as a marker down, and we knew Octa was coming, and there's another convention that's coming, and as a group we said, that's where we have to put our marker, and we have to be ready. It's a shame if we're not ready as a community for that. And here we are, and we said, how can we get from here to here? And So, those are some things that we're serious about. Anyway, I'm rambling on about that, but do you want to go into the grant a little bit, and then maybe I'll fill in some detail on the signage?
Celia Angelino, Clackamas Heritage Partners. And I specifically want to address the misleading, because I sent the grant and lots of information to everyone. So I felt like it was all there.
Sure.
Now, in talking and maybe some things you rushed or whatever, we did focus on some things like the 24/7, because quite frankly, I feel very blessed to have in these times been granted that whole amount, and we didn't really expect it. So that was the other piece, and then I feel like go for it, go for the dream, and then we'll adjust as we need to. So I feel we're adjusting. And the thing is, yes, we have a group coming May 18th that we are going to open the Center for and show Bound for Oregon, because she specifically, this teacher is coming back and specifically wanted the Bound for Oregon. And Randy has it up and running now with some updates, and we've been working, that's under permission with Scott, and we're working with them.
We've done
But
nothing without permission from
nothing.
Scott. Nothing.
And what I want to say, though, is people are still coming, and when are they going to stop? And I feel like being the visitor center, we can promote Oregon City. I was in Baker City this week, and I can't tell you how many times people were saying, our visitors are still asking, when are they going to open? When are they reopening? I said, well, we're working on it. And so I feel like the money's in the bank, the visitors are coming. We have Okta. I was at one of their planning meetings, and if we can get open, then they want to come. Jim Tompkins is, totally dedicated to Oregon City. And so I just feel like let's work through any of the hoops that we have to work together for the visitor, for the person that's coming in.
Let me give you some specifics on the grant. $81,500. We have $20,000 committed for repair on the site, physical improvements on the site. And we've talked about can that be matched at all from the city, and Denise and Ann were going to talk and see if that could be matched, because what we thought is if we could take that 20 and get it matched from the city with another 20, then we could take that to the Home Depot group and match it for 40 and get $80,000 worth of improvements. Okay, that's the synergy that we're trying to do right now. So that's we're working on that with the city right now. We have $15,000 dedicated in there for 24/7, which is right out of the report, for self-guided tour and educational experience. What we've done on that so far is we held a workshop. We invited a lot of people. When we picked the day, we didn't realize it was the same day as the Earth Day cleanup. Okay, and we apologize for that. I know a lot of you guys were involved in that, and it was like one of those, how do you pick a weekend, and we just had to do it. But we had 18 people at that day, and we literally walked every area in that site and physically walked it, talked it. We have 5 or 6 single-space pages of notes on critiquing of signage on that site that we are synthesizing, and I could get into detail, but there's a lot of improvement that can be made for not a lot of money. But we have $15,000 for improvement on signage, and that's things like going to QR codes where you can have them read by your smartphone, and it can give you more information about the topic at hand. So there's a ton of things we can do with signage. And one of the things that we really take seriously down there and we want to do is we've talked to the city, we've talked to the county and the state. We have no city map on site that says you are here, here's where else you should go. We have no county map that says you are here, here's where else you should go. And there is no state map that says you are here, where else you should go in our state. So we're talking about improving those things. So while we do have a bias in wanting to get open, we take the visitor center role very serious. We are not the end all at all in terms of the end of the trail. Sure, people should come there and get an experience about what that was like. but we are a visitor center with the responsibility of pushing those visitors everywhere in our community, in our county, and in our state. And that's something we can do. That's why we got the Civic Improvement Trust Grant, thank you very much, a few weeks ago, $5,400. What we're doing with that, and we've already got it programmed in, we're buying a TV monitor, we're buying computer stations and desks and chairs, so that what? So we can have the county's website up, have some audio visual up in the visitor center that pushes people from there elsewhere in our community. We're talking with TDC on creating a community-wide informational video on all the museums in town, the physical features in town, so that we can continue to entice the visitor to see us, sure, right there, but then go elsewhere in town. So signage, site improvements. We have $15,000 for staff time to do collections of information to enhance the Bound for Oregon. We're talking about the Bound for Oregon becoming more interactive. One of the things in the report, and we've all been there, is museums are too static in the past. And in today's world of smartphones and iPhones and kids and everything else, if you're not interactive enough, if you're not active engaging those, and I'm not going to do this justice, Randy should come up and talk about this, you've got to have a different presentation method.
Yes.
And Randy, do you want to share the type of things that we're talking about and exploring on how to improve the experience at the...
Yeah, sure.
Randy, if you'd introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Randy Glanz.
Most of the faces here I recognize. I don't think I recognize yours.
No, well, I strive to stay in the background.
How's that working for you today?
Yeah, well, it doesn't always work out. But my history is somewhat similar to Rocky. I was there the day they poured the cement. And I remember I cut my hand that day, so I literally have DNA in that building.
I love it.
So, although I'm sure I don't look old enough, I'm a bit of a de facto historian on the mechanical place and some of that. Honestly, I think I'm happy to have been somewhat insulated from the things you've been talking about and been able to deal more directly with the facility and how it operates and keep it going in that. And you know, it's always been something that you want to be able to run yourself in that. But at the same time, not everyone can repair their own car. So I've kind of been kept around to keep, you know, putting the duct tape on it and the bubble gum and all that kind of stuff. When it comes specifically to getting the main presentation in the Center Wagon back together, that actually was extremely simple. I went through the building and looked at everything, all the equipment and the hardware, and of everything in there, only one piece of equipment had failed in 3 years of Civic.
Really a good surprise.
So, yeah, so that was great. So 99% of the equipment in there is still functional. 20% of it we don't want anymore to use, which was slide projectors and things of that nature. So, you know, we've got 70 or 80% of it that came right back to life. So really, it was a matter of changing some light bulbs, cleaning some equipment up, and doing a little bit of computer work, and it's actually a better presentation today than it was when we first put it back together, because the technology has improved enough, it's helped us some. So actually not a big deal to get it up and running. Ready to go, push a button, and here we go. What we've been able to do, though, is we've been able to make it more flexible by the way we can handle it now. So if a specific group wants to come in, we can actually customize that, and the staff can do that. That's something we don't have to hire out a specialist or some art person to come and create that. But they can come in, put something on the front or the back end of that presentation that speaks specifically to maybe that group. So,
like we're doing for the German.
Yeah, we have a German.
To do for the German.
There's a group of German tourists coming in, and it's real easy to put a 2 or 3 minute thing on one or the other that speaks specifically about the influence of Germans in the journey out here. So that's fun. But on more of a day-to-day basis, what it gives us is it gives us some flexibility, like with school groups, so that there can be a template that a fourth grade class could use, and the teacher could prepare that with them, come in, and literally they can take control of those screens with this or their phone or whatever, and work with their own kids and speak specifically to what they've been learning in the classroom and bring it to them. So that's kind of exciting. I like to try and gain some altitude on these things, because I tend to look at what's in front of me a lot of times and not see it quite broadly enough. And so as I gain some altitude in this, what I see here is it is the end of the Oregon Trail, and that's true, but I think it's as much the beginning of everything else. And that's something that we've never really developed there in my history. And so we're not leveraging kind of the front door to all these other places in Oregon City or Clackamas County. And when it comes to putting together presentations or signage or any of this technology stuff, which I'm involved in but I'm not always a fan of, I fight really, really, really hard to keep Charlie Brown off of the team. And I'll tell you why. I'll use this illustration to death, but Charlie Brown, if you saw the cartoon, he was the best archer, present company excluded, out there. In that Charlie Brown would shoot his arrow and it would stick in the fence. Then he would walk over and draw the circle around it. When Lucy asked him why does he do that, he says, well, that way I never miss.
That's right.
Well, we operated that way for years, in that I put on an excellent presentation inside. So I shot my arrow through a circle and said, didn't I do a good job? It all works and everything. But then we had other people that were doing the same thing with their part of it.
Right.
So we had arrows all over the place.
And lots of bullseyes.
Lots of bullseyes. Everybody did great.
Lots of bullseyes.
But they were all doing it for where they were. So, just like this house we were hearing about earlier here, I'd almost like to see this as the front door, and each of those rooms in that house represent each of these different areas in Oregon City or in the county or in Oregon that we can open that door to and say, now you're here, let's take you there, okay, and let's develop that. What's limiting is two things. One is it's a blank canvas. So these guys will sometimes say, "Well, what can we do?" And I say, "Well, that's kind of a problem because we can do anything."
Anything.
Yeah, and it doesn't really scare me to say that. I just want to have one circle to put it all in.
Mm-hmm.
And so that becomes very exciting. But when we do that, if we are saying, for instance, we would like to develop signage that naturally leads somebody to McLaughlin House, as an example. Are we handicapped by material we can get from McLaughlin House to integrate into our presentations to do that? So that actually, we're waiting on Clackamas County Touring Development, or we're waiting on somebody else to get us stuff that we can use to help them. But it can be done. When it comes to end of the Oregon Trail specific stuff, we're filthy with it. It's just a matter of saying, let's put these presentations together, let's model them and do all that kind of stuff. So that's really exciting. But as far as the facility goes, it's really in good shape inside. For 3 years, I'm pretty surprised, and I've been in there a lot. I had my boat in there. So I've been in there a lot.
Did Scott Archer approve that, or was that before? That was a long time ago.
Yes.
That was green. I don't know.
I've never. It's the one only time I've launched at the transfer center and landed at the end of the Oregon Trail. So,
Randy, could you share one little thing that because part of what we were struggling with is what condition things were in. And what did we have to do to make things work again? And I think if we could ever have a time to have you come down, to see McLaughlin and the hologram and to see what's really there, it might really surprise some of you if you've never seen it. It's pretty amazing. But because some of that was in such good condition, we had one of those time servers available. And can you share the virtual welcome idea that you had bounced off? And it's not decided to do this, but this is the type of thing we can do that fits into the 24/7.
Yeah, we didn't plan this 10 years ago or whenever when we bought some of this hardware, but in sitting here looking at it on the shelf thinking, it's really not going to be recycled today. It's just not the way we would do it because we're not doing the slide projectors and laser discs and all this. But in thinking about it, some of this technology actually leads really conveniently into some of these digital signage applications. So if you've gone into Macy's or Nordstrom's, and in the youth department they've got TVs and they're playing one video, and in the young teens or whatever they've got one over here and all that, those are just computers playing that. And those computers are located in the store, but they're actually managed back in New York. And we have some of that technology, the exact same stuff, and it's multi-channel. So as an example, we could have what was originally going to be a ticket booth down next to the parking area. We could have for lack of a better term, a Zoltar kind of setup there where there's a virtual person that welcomes you. And that can be triggered when somebody walks up and they're in costume and they kind of give them the lay of the property, and that can be 24/7. What's nice is, because when we already own this stuff, is that that's completely schedulable.
Close enough.
Yeah. So that we can say from 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. do this, and at 5 p.m. till whenever do this, and we can change that whenever we want to. Every hour it can change and be something different. And that can be in all kinds of places around the grounds. So that opens up kind of a whole new door to the 24/7 thing. Do we want somebody that comes up, because they all come up and they want to go in what I term the third wagon. That's kind of the natural path to go in there. Well, there's a ticket booth there too. So is that another place where we have a signage that we can change it whenever we want to? So it would be electronic, but have control over it to make it very, very flexible. So, that's one little thing that we can do. It was funny, when we had these 18 people there, I was going to impress them all with how cutting edge I was, and I put up on the screen a photo of one of the signs that's existing out on the walkway. And I said, what if we put a QR code, which you've seen, it's a barcode. And, yeah. I put that up there, and I thought, I'm going to wow them with this. And before I could get to it, two of the 18 people had already hit it. And I had programmed that QR code, and it actually took them to the City of Oregon City's website.
Oh, nice.
So before I could tell them, they were doing it. And so, and I'm not sure that I wasn't the youngest person there. So they didn't just have to be kids to know what to do.
But we're not going to talk about that.
But also, there's an audible version of that, just so you know, that's called Shazam. And so that's something where we can put, we can have audio messages. So you walk by a sign and who has a zoo key? I have a zoo key still, okay? We put the zoo key in and it talked about the elephant or whatever like that. So this would be today's version of that. They walk up and it talks about, there's a sign there that talks about wagons. Okay, and it talks a little bit about the wagons, and if they were to hit this Shazam, it would actually take them somewhere.
Shazam's the name of the technology?
Yeah, it's
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't something that we invented that we're going to sell. I mean, it doesn't really fit the covered wagons. But
I don't mind. No, I'd love to do it. But, well, they get back to the covers, and I get excited about the covers and things you could do there, too.
Yeah.
But
we do have an estimate on repainting the cover.
So anyway, that's just really fun in that I can hear a sound, I can hear something, I can press a button, it takes me to a place just because of the sound. Okay, just like if I had scanned something or if I had opened up a paper brochure. So they're pieces. They're not the answer. They're just pieces of it. But it's in pretty good shape for sitting so long.
Sorry to get, we're so excited about trying to do something down there. We don't want to do it wrong. We really don't. We don't even want to manage. What we want to do is work together with the city, through the management of the city, and bring that place back to life. And we believe that we are in line for 2 more grants. We're not sure. We believe we have a high chance of getting both of them. They're $17,500 each. So we think we might have a little over $105,000 to reinvest into that site. I don't know if I think the other thing, and not tonight, but we've given, I think, our business plan and the ideas and the concepts in writing to all of you a couple of different times. Any critique or feedback of specifics, we'd really value, quite frankly. We want to do it. We want to do it right.
I have a question, Dan. Prescott, Arizona, Pendleton, Oregon, and Cheyenne, Wyoming have all been arguing for the last 50 years about who has the oldest rodeo in the United States. And yet all of them there's only one of them that's really the first rodeo. And
Don't tell us.
but yet they're all successful.
Sure.
And I think even today, well, the livestock industry has been shrinking really over the last 100 years, a lot. Now we don't have clowns down there, we don't have raging bulls, but we also don't have 3 other competitors. There's only one end of the trail. And
People in the Dalles might argue with you.
Is that right? Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
right. There is only one.
at least I didn't say the Westland Bridge.
When we had the celebration, Mark Hatfield gave the stamp to Salem. So I mean,
I haven't heard myself a lot of dispute about the end of the trail. And my point is that, and I wasn't here when CHP was a different entity with different people doing, things on the site. So I may show some ignorance about the history of that experience, but it occurs to me that to keep this from being, because you guys have passion for this, the people that are here tonight are ones with passion, people that are up here speaking about it have the passion. I think for it to last like it has in those other rodeo towns is that it's got to somehow be tied to the economy, to the, I wrote down here before you said the beginning of everything, I had this slogan, end of the trail, beginning of Oregon. Because if it's somehow tied strong enough to the business community, as people who are passionate about this site come and go throughout the generations, there needs to be enough passion in the business community and the rest of the community that rallies into this thing and supports it, so that it doesn't really rely on the passions of one person or even 10 people, or the pocketbooks of 1 or 10 people. And I'm just hoping that whatever, and we're talking a lot about details, but I think moving forward, if somehow we can all embrace that as trying to cultivate a citywide passion around a site or a series of events, that it'll be more sustainable in the future and less likely to flounder again as it did once before.
I don't have anybody up at this point. There he goes, but a couple of remarks I have. And I know Commissioner Smith has been involved with discussions with you. All of these things have been going forward. I think for most of us, our comfort level would be strongly increased if he were a more direct liaison, perhaps, with Mr. Archer. And if you're willing to take that role on. Because I think most of our comfort levels is probably going to be tied to how comfortable you are with it because of your involvement. The other thing, if I'm looking for matching funds from the city, of course, we've had our budget committee meeting. I don't think we have any line item that deals with this, but if some thought could be given to us, and maybe we even have a work session prior to our budget meeting in terms of what the possibilities are, if something more solid and defined comes up before we work on the budget. That's a request.
Well, I don't know. You've come up with a solution to a problem that we really haven't talked about.
No, he brought it up. I
know they brought it up, but I haven't talked to this.
I know
about this with Mr. Archer. This is news to me tonight that you might need $25,000.
That was a really recent conversation, so that hasn't even been.
But before we say we need a work session and I need to do something with the budget, you do have contingency there. There's also some other park funds and other monies that. So I don't want to talk about a solution until I really know the problem better.
Okay.
And we'll look for other solutions if that comes to pass.
Okay.
So
the other request, suggestion, we're in a request, but in terms of bringing businesses involved here, Funnel Box is doing very well in Oregon City. I don't know if they've been involved in any of the kinds of things you've been working with.
They haven't. I know they've expressed interest, and then also when the newspaper article came out, we had another downtown Oregon City company call. I've emailed them. I sent that to Gail, talking about, hey, how can we help? And they're a creative company also. So, and then I think also I totally agree with involvement. I think if the community sensed that we were working together, the city and the people with passion. I mean, I've had a number of individuals say, when you're ready to put covers back on the wagon or get those hoops painted, you call me. And I think that could be something the community really rallies around. And I feel that it's something of almost, as you said, it's an icon and it's a symbol. And I think if those were to even painted or cleaned up, and maybe they get covered somehow a little different, it would be almost a part of our rebirthing, our reawakening again. I mean, that's kind of out there, but I think it's symptomatic.
Yeah, you have those hoops out there as hoops, and they're not covered, and then you have one of these technical images on a thing that does what it did with the movie Titanic, when you see this rusty hole at the bottom and then it brings it back to a ship. And that would probably be pretty
His
good.
juices going.
Well, I was just thinking I'm beautiful on the inside, but you got to get past looking at me from the outside. And our curb appeal there is kind of like looking at me, and so I think working on those hoops would really help my looks.
Yeah, I think,
Uphill.
Then you convert it all to a TV edition. I mean, a 3D edition.
Mr. Mayor?
Actually.
I got Commissioner Smith. Was
okay.
there a specific comment?
Well, it might help your conversation.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify a couple of things about facility stuff that may just help as you're conversing and asking questions and so forth. But Dan hit quickly on the facility issues at the beginning, but you're more about the big vision, and I have to live with the part about how to deal with the facility. So I want to make sure that it doesn't go kind of by the wayside and get lost in the discussion. Just in terms of, and I appreciate what Dan said, that there was we had part of the 2010 report was the facility. We had an architectural firm, engineering type of firm that came through and gave us that pretty bleak picture about the building, and that was one company's opinion, and it was kind of a very it was the most extreme look at everything in terms of what we pretty high level of deferred maintenance. What we've been doing, and a lot of credit to Denise and Ann Crandall, our building maintenance person that works with Denise, is they've been working closely. Well, Denise and Ann spend a lot of time at the buildings because of our maintenance. We inherited the maintenance of that whole site kind of on a very short notice a couple of years ago, and we've kind of learned how to figure out what we're doing there and so forth. But what Dan was talking about is that that our staff have looked at some creative ways of reducing. If we really needed to, if it's the commission's desire to open those buildings up at some point, what has to happen, and how can we accomplish that? And so that's what Dan was referring to. I wanted to clarify that a little bit more. Is there are some reduced ways. Eventually we're going to have to look at a long-range maintenance plan of. There's still some deferred maintenance out there. And so we do have some creative ways of doing it. The idea about Dan pitching the $20,000 partnership, that's a pretty new idea. So it that was hitting a lot of it. I heard it once in a brief. I wasn't even in that meeting, and so
No blindsiding. Remember, no blindsiding.
well, he talked about it with other staff of mine, and they shared it with me, and I hadn't even had a chance to barely process that. So the last piece I want to mention though is just in terms of thinking. What our thinking is if those buildings are going to be used, what we have to do as a minimum level of making sure that they're able to be open, and those are the kind of things we're looking at. The other piece is that there are some ADA upgrades that we need to do that weren't, I guess, part of the code originally, because those buildings are now 20-ish, almost 20 years old, I guess. So we have to do a few ADA compliance things that they're not gigantic things, but they have to be dealt with, and we really feel like we'd need to do them before we open the doors again, if that's what the commission wants to do. So we'd have to have the opportunity to work on some of those kinds of things. One of the things with this is the staff is trying to manage how to keep things kind of. It's in a mothballed state, but believe me, that doesn't mean we're not doing anything as far as maintenance. And I think, as you know, we're mowing the grounds, we're cleaning the restrooms, when tree limbs fall down, we go down and clean them up, and so on and so forth. So there really are some, even though that we can find a more effective and a more efficient solution cost-wise to the maintenance issues, they're still real, and I've still got to have a way to figure out how to deal with those. So I want to keep that on your plate in terms of when you're talking about what direction you want to go, and have the opportunity to make sure we solve those problems. So.
Before Commissioner Smith speaks, I want to say that I have a great deal of confidence in you as staff. I saw the doomsday scenario for the swimming pool, and I've seen a great evolution there, and I think we could probably see the same thing for the covered wagons.
We have a talented couple of people on our staff that have done a great
Denise
job.
Guy, tremendous work. Appreciate what you've done, too. So.
Were you speaking of the other activities on the grounds, as the park area or something? Just in case people weren't aware of it, that was actually, in retrospect now, overbuilt that way. And there's actually facilities on site, if you look under certain bushes and things, that you could actually do full concerts there, full stage productions, all that stuff.
Oh, yeah, the
so it's all there, and it is actually all functional. I checked it out.
It's all functional.
Yeah.
Well, you're
I
next.
know, but
He's
she
giving
says
it to me.
Oh,
Yielding.
well, then you've got to withdraw. Then you can punch it again. Come on, I mean, you got to do this right. Now you can push it on again and put yourself out. You got to do this officially.
Okay.
Now he's got it. Kathy Roth, you're on.
Mine is real simple facility questions, I believe. What options have been looked at for those hoops? And what I'm specifically thinking about is holograms. You were talking about holograms, or lighting like we're talking on the elevator, or corrugated steel. I don't know, just not fabric again.
Not a lot. I mean, and Denise, if you want to say anything else, and Dan, if you got other thoughts, but I mean, quite frankly, that's the big, that's the most visible part of it. I don't think we can do the fabric thing again because we're probably going to be back to where we're at. There have been some discussions about some other methods that are more weatherproof, but whatever that solution is, if there's a desire to put a cover of some type back over those again, it's not going to be inexpensive. I mean, that's so big that it's way beyond what we're talking about with the kind of the limited maintenance stuff that we're talking about. But there has been some discussion about just cleaning the rust and painting them to at least, even if they're not covered, at least have that. I mean, we have talked a little bit about that. There's been, I don't know, Dan, you were talking about the Home Depot thing. I think you were even talking about some grants or...
Actually, earlier on, too, PGE, I think, made some offers.
Some things like that where we might be able to partner with a company or an agency that could help us accomplish that and donate part of that or some of it or whatever. But beyond that, it's pretty... We haven't...
Well, that's what I'm thinking.
The covered part, we haven't really gotten much into that.
Right, but what I'm thinking of is, I know the reason you haven't, but if you could get the illusion of a cover at a less expensive cost.
There are options.
One option actually to look at that would be a great option would be to actually do a frosted, semi-transparent, hard material, because we can actually project on that if we wanted to from behind and turn those into anything you want them to be. And you may get away with not even doing 100% of it and doing just the road side of it, to give the effect. So there's options there, certainly. And there's, that was always uplit. So the lights that were white before, if we did end up with something up there, those can be now changed out to LED stuff now, and they can change colors all night long if you want. And I think we're one hoop short. I think we need one out on the road.
One hoop short.
I think it would be really interesting to, and we'd be happy to work with staff and even bring back some options. But those are the kind of things that I want to get into possibility thinking and really analyzing what do we want to see, what's the vision for that? Because I agree they should be cleaned up. It's not inexpensive to paint them. I mean, the scaffolding and the paint and it's a 3-step process. And I mean, I've worked with Denise and Ann, and they asked to get some bids, and we did. One of them is between $37,000 and $40,000 to paint the hoops. I mean, it's not inexpensive to paint those hoops, but it would be a really good job. It'd probably last a lot longer than the original style. But the other thing, Randy's idea, the other idea is just as technology has changed on the inside, I think those fabrics have changed on the outside. And so I thought the other day, and I haven't done this, but I thought Salem Tent and Awning put the first hoops up there. And I thought about just asking them, okay, if you were to do that today, would you do it the same? And what would it be? Just no decision, just thoughts, just ideas. I think there is something better than what we had. I don't know what that is, but it'd be an interesting process to go through because I think it could be really good for the community. Yeah.
And I think I've talked with Dan about this too. So one of the couple of brainstorms that I think either we talked about or a couple other people talked about. I mean, you could see, if those of you that are in the theater world, I could see doing even just cables at intervals that are that pick up the light that read as a solid in a scrim sort of fashion. But in addition to that, the way that you hide lights in theater for with teasers or tormentors, if you had cable going across with little hanging strips that go down, as they go down, it would read as a solid, but it would still allow for the wind to go through. And I think there's a lot of possibilities that could really.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm still going to have a big step here, and I'm willing to work through that step because I do, like I said, have concerns because what I think the commission stated before you guys went for the grant was far different than what we're being presented with now, and so I have concerns about it because we weren't ready yet to make that leap as a commission, and I don't like being put in the position where we have to make that jump when we weren't planning on it. So I'm anxious to see that discussion play out a little bit more. Back to a couple other questions. In my history, I didn't work with CHP all this 15 years, but I worked with CHP early on. Oregon Trail Foundation, CHP, and even now where we're at with Historic Oregon City. And yes, a lot has changed, and yes, some hasn't. And so I would like you to tell us a little bit about how you see the evolution I think has taken place, but especially from what the changes are with CHP from when it closed to where it is now. And in addition to that, most of the time that I was connected with CHP, and this is not any different, I think, than any other nonprofit or museum organization, is there's always this big strive out there to get grant money to save and to operate for a year. And what happens when this $80,000 is gone? Because it will be gone, and it will be gone in a fairly short time. And with the Interpretive Center build, it was constantly finding grants to survive for another year. And eventually, whether the grant, in some cases the grants ran out, or in some cases the relationship between CHP and the people that were giving the grants ran out, and so the money ran out. And I see that now this is a great success to get a step, but how does that continue for that first step to the next year and the next year and the next year? Because, there's no doubt that the city looked bad when this building closed. We all did. So we all take ownership in that too, because I think in a lot of respects the city wasn't doing a very good job keeping tabs on CHP as it should have been. So there was a lot of problems with that. So as any business, I'm not a business person. I own a small business. I don't consider myself a business person, nor do I think anyone in this room does. But I know that if you let someone manage your building and they don't do a very good job, it's going to take a hell of a lot more to change for you to get them to do it again. And so that's where I think a lot of us are. I'm not opposed to it, but it's really got to be done different, and we have to assure ourselves that it is going to be successful because we can't do this again. This is our last chance to fix it. And I think that, the structure of CHP has changed multiple times. But so in some people's iteration, this is the second time. For me, it's the third. Oregon Trail Foundation, CHP, Historic Oregon City. And at what point do we say it's not changing and we're still having the same outcomes? I want to know, so I want you to tell me kind of what you see has changed over the years, and I also want you to tell me who's on the board now and who was on the board when we closed in 2009.
Okay, well, that's a lot of
It's a lot
questions.
of information.
First of all, I agree with a lot of what you said. And what probably has changed the most is instead of running it like a nonprofit, we're running it like a business. Because we have to be sustainable. And we've been running now for, 2.5 years on with no grant money. And we've proven that we can maintain the visitor center and the information center and run it efficiently and effectively without grant money. We will never depend on grant money for ongoing operations, period. Grant money is for projects and specific things within the site. Now, one of the reasons, and some of the specifics that we changed, is taking people off salary and put them on hourly. We changed the way we pay people at the center to be very efficient. Before, when the model was there under the Oregon Trail Foundation and under the beginnings of Clackamas Heritage Partners, there was always this division between the visitor center and the interpretive center, and it just felt awkward to me. It wasn't integrated. And it was like you had people within the visitor center, and I'm not putting anybody down, okay, but that their main focus was the visitor center, and they couldn't hardly sell a ticket to anybody that went into the interpretive center. So you had all this double staffing and wasted effort and wasted time. Believe me, those days are over. They're over. And we have shown, and with full knowledge and full permission from the county in managing the visitor center, that we have tried our very best to give a small experience about the end of the Oregon Trail there. We've changed and opened that back up to more of some products that are sold, and we have increased our cash flow while we've been operating the visitor center. And so that model has changed. The operational model has changed. In terms of the model for Oregon Trail Foundation and Clackamas Heritage Partners, now Historic Oregon City, I don't know that I have time to go through the whole history, but the Oregon Trail Foundation was first and foremost focused on the end of the Oregon Trail. Their only primary focus was the success of that operation. They sought grants. They had a board that was respected statewide, region-wide, and that was its focus. And if we remember, what we then went about as a community effort was to get all of the historical organizations in this community to work together. That's what a novel idea, that we would all somehow work together. And this idea that Clackamas Heritage Partners is this nasty word, that was decided, that very name was decided not by the end of the Oregon Trail Foundation, not by me, not by our staff. It was decided by the community. And it was decided to be a uniting, yes it was, Rocky, don't shake your head.
Well, I'm not the only one shaking my head.
Well, that was a group that had representatives from all the museums on it, from the Historical Society, from the Stevens Crawford House, from the O'Golphin House. Jack Hammond on our board headed it up. It was a very joint effort, and that name was picked to be a uniting name. Now, I'm not saying it worked out that way. I'm not saying that there weren't economic problems. I'm not saying there weren't management problems. Okay, I'm not trying to deny any of that. But I'm saying that in the history of those organizations, Clackamas Heritage Partners was supposed to be a uniter. Now, it was designed to start with the end of the Oregon Trail and the Historical Society. Clackamas Heritage Partners, those two boards merged, and we, Clackamas Heritage Partners, a lot from the assets of the end of the Oregon Trail Foundation, paid off over $100,000 in debt that the Historical Society had. So this idea that we're this big, bad, nasty group in town, I don't think it's.
Well,
it's-
first of
when
all, I
you-
didn't
when
say
you-
that.
When you, I know you didn't,
No,
but when but I mean, it doesn't hold water. But that organization was to work and get those two going, and then to have validity enough where others would want to join, because it's hard to impose. You don't want to impose your will on nonprofits. Those boards that are formed have a passion for the very physical building, structure, or organization that they're most defined by. In other words, the people that are involved in the Rose Farm, they're there because their passion is for the Rose Farm. There's nothing wrong with that. And the McLaughlin House is the same way, the End of the Trail is the same way, and the Historical Society and Stevens Crawford House the same way, as well as the Ermiting the same way. There's nothing wrong with that. I think there was good intent by having Clackamas Heritage Partners, but really it should have been more like what we're trying to do now with our site committee. Not trying to necessarily take over or run those operations and run those boards. That's maybe altruistic, but more of a coalescer of things like marketing and hours of operation and ticketing and those things that don't get into the detail operations of those groups. So, I mean, that's just a little snapshot of the history. So I think there were good intentions all the way along. I think the economy caught us. I think some management did catch us. But I really want to learn from the past and not repeat that. What our board, I don't have the list of our board members, to be honest with you.
I do.
We gave it
most
to
of the
them.
same, but what we're talking about in our board right now is to expand those and to have school representatives. We talked about having a city representative, and to the point where, we've even talked about you coming onto our board. So we recognize that needs to be expanded and done, and I think there's a real desire to do that on the board. But we want to be about now, really, Clackamas Heritage Partners is back to wanting to be a good member of the community, being a member with the other organizations on a site committee and working together. And Gail does a lot in that regard. She does a lot of coalescing and a lot of just information and communication flow. But we brought our gaze back to really the visitor center and the End of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center, and really trying to make that thrive again. And quite frankly, that's why we sat down a few months ago and said, can we get some grants? These things are happening. The OCTA's coming. Can we do something? And it's not that we didn't want everybody to succeed and the other museums to succeed. We do. But we thought maybe we can help again. Maybe we can get some grants. So I don't know if that's answered your question, but
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on, what CHP was supposed to be. I mean, that's completely what it was supposed to be. And the only problem was you don't take 10 organizations that aren't working together and put the manager of one of them in charge of everything. That was the mistake, and it didn't work. And but what it did do is funnel all the money to the museum, and so
which museum?
To the End of the Oregon Trail.
That's not true, Rocky.
Well, it is.
Ask Craig Danielson. Excuse me.
Well, I have financials.
I'm not gonna have misrepresentation. I'm sorry. We can disagree, but call Craig Danielson up. He was on our board, and he is now the chairman of the Clackamas County Historical Society, and ask him if money from CHP, that organization, went where it went. Ask him.
I'm talking about in terms of marketing, in terms of grants. If you type in any organization in this city, it takes you to the Historic Oregon City website, not to anywhere else. If you look under this city and drive from location to location, it's Historic Oregon City's logo that all of the sites in the city sit with underneath on the signage.
You know why it's that way?
I do know why it's that way.
I know why. I sat in the meetings at Lowell, at your cabin, and we brainstormed on how that could happen and a look on how that could be done. Yeah.
Right.
And the website
but what
showed everything.
It's misleading, and so
Why is it misleading?
because those entities are not under Historic Oregon City.
They're not now, but they were during CHP.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what,
Think of it as not as control, but as marketing.
I know.
Okay.
But I hope that's the change, because it very much was about control before.
We We do not want control of anybody.
Okay, but I'm out of time. But the other question, and Craig's a great example. I want to know what the relationship currently between Clackamas Historical Society and CHP is at this point.
There's no, some board members are the same. I think Marilyn sits on both boards. I think it's good. We wrote a letter just recently in support of their grant application for Metro Enhancement Funds to paint the Stevens Crawford House.
Okay.
I don't think there's any animosity. I think there may be individual members that are harboring things. That's always going to be the case.
Okay.
But in terms of the board, I think we talked to Craig. Craig talks up. He recently
We
sent us.
support him, yeah.
So I think it's good.
And there's at least 2 or 3 board members here tonight, which I think is a huge step in the right direction. Because I think in the past, the board wasn't necessarily connected to the everyday operations of CHP. And it wasn't when I worked there, and I don't think it was pretty much ever since then. And so that's the one thing that has to change, and I think that has. So when I say, I don't want you to imply that there's no changes been made. There has, but I have to question: has enough changes been made for me to go there again? And I'm not sure it is. I'm willing to work towards that because I think it is an important part of our community. I mean, that's where I got, essentially my first paid job. So, and I got it because, this is Oregon City, and this was the place that I thought as a high school student, why are thousands of people coming here? And that's why I'm so attached to the history today. It's an amazing place. And we all saw how amazing that potential was at the Interpretive Center. Unfortunately, it didn't happen the way we all thought. And so how do we make sure this time it does? And so I hope we get there, but it's going to take a while.
I want to make a suggestion. We've got a couple other people who want to speak, but my suggestion is this. You're considering appointing Commissioner Smith. What you might consider doing is, what we have then is actually have an appointment of a member of the City Commission. I make the appointments.
I agree
totally with that. And I think you put it on a more official basis. And were that to happen, I think the likely person that I would appoint would be Commissioner Smith. And I think that's the best way to deal with that.
Okay.
I now have Commissioner Mumm.
Oh, thank you. I've heard a lot tonight. I've taken 9 pages of notes here. Thank you, guys. I love it. I want you to know that I kind of anticipated this having to be brought up with the grant, and I appreciate having this conversation tonight because having that building open, it would be great. It would be the best thing ever. Yes, we do have history. Yes, we do have problems from our history. Yes, the management that was hired was not maybe the best. And yes, the board was not involved. So all those yeses to the history is correct as far as I can tell. Maintenance, Scott, I think we need to build that into a budget line item for future because those will still be our buildings, correct? So I don't know if that's something that you guys can work on, not this budget, but maybe the next one, because you're going to have to figure out how to maintain buildings that we have. So that was one thing.
Council direction.
Okay, that was just one thing that popped into my head, is having that as a line item somewhere. I loved all the ideas that you brought forward with all of the technology, and I think that's great, way beyond my mind, but I know my granddaughter would just know exactly what to do with it. Let's see, what else?
She's been bragging about her granddaughter a lot.
I have that. I did. I brag about my granddaughter a lot. It's a brag moment for my granddaughter. No. All right, back to this. I think that having school kids have that opportunity is the best thing ever. I went to an auction and purchased a trip for my then granddaughter's 3rd grade class to have a tour of that building, and the very next year they'd be in 4th grade and the building was closed. So that 3rd grade class got a 4th grade advanced lesson in history. So that was great. having the businesses involved, I think positively we should have a representative from our commission if that's the decision that we move forward. Having Scott Archer and Denise Kai be the key people from the city staff is perfect. Look at this. You're laughing. I got notes.
No. I was just going to suggest have Scott Archer and his designated staff member.
Well, Denise, lovely Denise back there. Have to have a brag moment about Denise. Her dress looks lovely. Thank you. I love the fact that you're running it like a business. Love it. That's exactly what we have to do. And you're exactly correct. We cannot rely on grants, because those grants are going to dry up and go away. Love the fact that you move the employees to hourly instead of salary. Love it. It's great thinking. And so where do we go from here is my next question, because I'm really excited to get this moving.
And,
Into mine.
Commissioner Pauly will now tell us where we're going to go from here.
I love it. The business lady on our commission.
That's right.
I think Betty pretty much said it all, but to wrap it up into a concise little package, thanks for coming and having this dialogue. I think that there is a great hope for partnership with the city and CHP to move forward. From a business standpoint, it's essential that it's sustainable, specifically more money coming in than going out, to run it like a business, to generate revenue and or support stream, and don't build what you can't maintain. I think all of us in retrospect, we look at those hoops, they're so cost prohibitive, to maintain, and even they cost a lot of money even to take down. I mean, we're kind of in a catch-22. Yes. And so I think every single decision that is made, the focus needs to be on, can we sustain it? Can we, continue it? Yeah. Do we have budgeting for it? Don't build what you can't maintain. I think that's really important, and to use the grant money to create revenue stream to sustain it and continually build up a center, make sure that money is going directly into something to generate money for it. And the line item for budgeting, maybe that won't be necessary, or maybe it will. But it's
I think the
interesting to look
city's still
into.
responsible for
Yeah,
managing it,
right.
Or for maintaining the building.
If I might, I
it's
think what we
appropriate
do
for us
have
to
money in our
participate.
current budget for is the mowing and those kinds of service.
Yes.
The kind of
Yes.
service level we're providing now, we have
Right.
budgeted for, and that's what we budgeted for in the future.
Just
Okay.
not the, beyond that, with the big picture of
Right.
the deferred maintenance.
And that's
all
the
that.
piece we have to have a better conversation on, right?
Right.
Okay.
And again, we have lots of people here that have come, I'm sure, for this particular discussion. Anybody that wishes to come up and ask questions, make some points, and of course,
Thelma, come on up.
Hagemiller, please come on up. Don't do so slowly, though. Anybody that doesn't know, her name of her business is Slow Poke Tours.
No, I love it when you say it.
Slow Poke Tours.
Good job, Thelma.
I never heard that. That's good.
I've loved sitting in the audience listening to this discussion tonight. A lot of issues have come on top of the table in front of the public that I've heard in the background in the past, and I just am really appreciative of the fact that they're being discussed on top of the table. A couple of things that haven't been brought out yet. Not only is Okta coming, but what you're looking at with the stuff that Randy's working on and the grant and things like that, you've got the opening of the bridge coming up in
Yes, we
October.
do.
This facility needs to be part of that opening
Oh, good idea.
ceremony stuff out there. I mean, it's a perfect tie-in with everything here at the stuff. So, you know, if you can get things going for that, then you'll be ready for OCTA when it gets here.
That's a great idea.
I sent to Gail today a email that was requesting proposals for upcoming group tour operator group that I belong to. It's called the Oregon Tour and Travel Task Force, and they only hold 4 meetings a year, but they take a year in advance and take applications for where those locations are. It's been at least 5 years since we've hosted that group here in Oregon City. Those are all people working in the packaged travel industry that I work in. And they are the people out there in the world that you need to know what's going on here. The other thing is that this afternoon I attended the Tourism Development Council meeting. And there's hardly a time I go to anything that deals with tourism out there when I'm not asked the question, because somehow or another they associate me with Oregon City.
I wonder why.
I don't know, because I don't even live here. But I was asked
But
the
you love
question,
Oregon City.
are they gonna ever get to working together to get things so that it becomes a viable tourism destination again? And I said, well, I'll tell you after I go to the meeting tonight. So I just am encouraged by on top the table discussion and hope that things will get going again. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Anybody else care to come forward? Good to see you again, Lowell. And Lowell Miles Fiberglass. An important person in our community.
I'm Lowell Miles. I have Miles Fiberglass and Composites, and been in Oregon City and Clackamas County for more years than I can remember now.
For a little while.
But I would just like to say a few things on behalf of the board members of the organization. Not only the current board members, but the members in the past. I was on both boards when we put those together, and we put them together because we thought the synergy of both together was going to be more efficient, and we could do more with putting them together. As it turned out, it didn't work that way. But I know myself and a number of other board members have not only put their time and effort and their enthusiasm into the organization as it was and as it is right now. We put our own money into it. I put tens of thousands of dollars into both organizations. We rebuilt a streetcar so it could be traded for one that had a wheelchair accessible, and I put $15,000 into that so that we could have a streetcar that would take people around to all the facilities. So, and we also had representation on our board from the city. Before we merged, we had representation from the county commissioners on it. So there were people involved in that. Unfortunately, there was a number of things that just didn't work out, and we'd be the first ones to admit that. But I know for a fact, I know all these people that are on the board right now, and they want nothing but good things to happen. Otherwise, they wouldn't spend their time and effort. We've got a lot of other things we could be doing. But I really think that the enthusiasm is there to make this really be something and make our community a better place. So that's our only reason for being involved, frankly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lowell, and I appreciate all of the work you've done over those years. Thank you.
Yes.
And Marilyn, another business owner in Oregon City.
certainly wasn't planning on doing this morning when I came to work, but
But we appreciate you being here.
I'm Marilyn Morrissey, and I'm on the CHP board. And I'm a planner, and when you've put together a plan, you kind of take stock of what you've got, and you want to take stock of how much risk you want to take and where you want to be in a certain amount of time. And then you go about allocating your assets in the appropriate way to that you think that will get you there. And most importantly, after you've done that, you monitor them. You watch them every year, every quarter. You take a look and you make sure that those assets are doing what you thought they were going to do. And so I think it's sort of similar with this. You have an investment, a fantastic piece of property, opening up to Oregon City, which you could use to bring in lots of tourism and lots of dollars. And you've got two people here that have about 200% enthusiasm in this and lots of great ideas. And so I think that this is a chance of a lifetime, and that is worth taking the chance to put it together, a plan, but I'll also keep your eye on it and make sure that everything is going down the road the way it should be. And I think that it would be great to have a member of the commission on our board, because that would really open up things to what we can and can't do, and strive for accomplishing those goals of bringing more people and tourism dollars into Oregon City. So I guess the only other thing I would say is that of all those board meetings that I attended prior to CHP not running the end of the Oregon Trail anymore, was that every single board member had the best efforts and best outlook for Oregon City. They were always trying to figure out a way to bring tourism into Oregon City and make Oregon City a place everybody would want to come. So I think that's it.
All right.
Thank
you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Marilyn.
Anybody else care to speak? Well, then I'll go back to our agenda, and I think it brings us to the city manager's report.
Do you need clarification on what
Yeah.
direction?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what we were going to
Well, first of all, I think there's some communication that has to happen between Mr. Archer and Mr. Frazier. I mean, the proposal came forward in terms of a matching grant and so forth, and you hadn't had a chance.
well, that's a separate issue.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem. I can work with Scott on that, and we'll figure out what to do, because those opportunities do come up mid-year sometimes from other places. But I think what we need tonight is some direction on whether to work with this group more, whether we should come back with a draft work agreement with them, or
I think,
what?
first of all, before we come with a draft agreement, I would feel far more comfortable if the city had a board member on there. And I think this can probably be done. I mean, it's going to be your decision whether to have such a board member, and this can be done in short order.
Okay, so the timing of when, Scott, I'm guessing there's some timing issues here, and do you want Mayor to propose certain future agenda items for this? Because right now we don't know what to do with it.
Well, first of all, I think we'd be well served with having a board member there very early on in the process, and I think that'll assist some of the communications. In terms of an agenda item, I think it's appropriate to bring it on as an agenda item. The specific focus, I don't think we have at this point, but that's okay.
But I think we need to say, yes, we want you to work with this group. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Well, if we have,
right now, I'm not sure what kind of staff report.
Yeah.
No, I understand that. So I guess I think it's a little premature to give you that direction.
I do too.
But the point is, in terms of working with this group, if we have a commission board member, we'll be working with that group, and I think. I think we've got to work with this group in terms of what might happen to OCTA and all these things to make sure that we have something for people to do here if they wish to do so. So I think there's some short-term goals that we've sort of already committed to. even though we don't know how it's going to happen. But we already brought in the desire to have something at that facility ready for Okta, and I think that we've already given that direction earlier on, and so I think.
Well, for example, do you want the staff to work with them, this particular group, or a different group, or other groups? Do you want us to think about what could happen in those interpretive buildings?
we've got. I think the chair of the Okta group is we can communicate with directly, and then bring in CHP into the discussion. But how can the facility be used for that group? I think is a question that you.
I want to make sure that our staff does not get at cross purposes with the commission.
Right.
Yeah.
On what we're supposed to be letting happen down there.
Yes.
What we're supposed to be encouraging down there, to what level and what extent. Are we supposed to work with an exclusive group or multiple groups? And I know you can't make all the final decisions. Certainly you couldn't even talk about a draft work agreement. But we do need to know when we bring it back to you, in what format, and how general you want it to be. I get a feeling that it should be very general.
Yeah.
But
if we're doing something, if we want to do something for Okta, then we ought to be communicating with Okta.
Right, but beyond Okta.
Well,
that's not who's here tonight.
I understand that. I understand that, but
the only goal that we've set as a commission is to deal with that. We haven't made any goals for the building, and I think that's my concern about seeing where we're at, because we haven't okayed that yet, and we're not there yet. And so I think that we need to continue this discussion, and it needs to be on the agenda very soon to go to the next step. But I'm not willing tonight to say I'm comfortable moving forward.
How about an idea of appointing a task force that would include a handful? Is that too long?
No, God, no.
Okay.
I think
because I thought it was going to be a short window. You've got 2 months to come up with some solutions.
In a sense, I think we need to be focused in the short term about what we're going to do. We've had task force before. We've hired consultants before. They've been somewhat of a disaster. I think the direction has to come primarily from us, but I think functionally we need to get a city commission representative on that board, and I think that's the first thing that has to happen. That's a decision we can make.
Well, personally, I have to know, are we going to deal exclusively with CHP before I can even figure out if I want to sit on that board? Or is there another organization?
You mean a commission representative sit on that board?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, first I have to know, is that the entity that this body wants to deal with to help our city parks person, Scott Archer, and our city manager?
This is the group that's responsible for the visitor center. I mean, it's a key group. And I don't think anybody's going to argue that it's not a key group.
No, I totally agree, but that's only the visitor center.
I understand that, but it's located at our site.
Right.
I mean, it's the partnership is there one way or another because they're located on city property. Partnership's already there.
Actually, the building they're in is ours as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And if we had a commission member on the board, then we would have a real working partnership with a continual dialogue.
That's my point, and I think specific goals in terms of longer-term future can come out of that representation. But the fact that the visitor center is there, and the fact that it's managed by CHP, and the fact that we own the facility and we own the property, we already are in a partnership of some form. I mean,
I'm going to be real specific. What if tomorrow these individuals come in and say, we've got $80,000 plus, we need to get into the interpretive buildings to work on this and to set up this, and we want to advertise, we want to do some of these other things. I don't want there to be this concern that we're doing something we're not authorized to do, that they're misleading somebody, that there hasn't, and I know there isn't really a consensus yet. So do we need a second work session, for example? Do we need...
Well, if in fact that group comes to you, I would suggest you schedule a second work session.
All I can tell you is the direction is as clear as mud right now.
It's not very
for
clear.
us.
It's not very clear.
Right?
Right.
Am I right?
Yeah, I'm probably as a person who has to kind of
You
deal
have
with
to
this
pull
on
it together.
more of a day-to-day basis. I really appreciate what Mr. Fraser is saying, and it's an awkward position as the staff person here. I guess what I'm doing at this point is, and have been trying to do to my best ability, is interpret what the commission's direction was previously and make sure that we're kind of balancing that.
There has to be a high level of comfort on this commission before we really proceed. It may be that we can proceed fairly rapidly, but right now there is not that high level of comfort. So if you're asking for some specific direction, I don't think whatever the direction is, I want it to be a consensus among us all. That's the direction we want to go in.
But I think part of the problem was the meeting preceding the grant submittal was, I thought, extremely clear in terms of direction.
Yep.
That is not how staff feels it was, and so there was a gap there, and I think they're trying to figure out what that gap is.
Yeah.
From me, it was very clear that we've only made one commitment to that building, and that's to deal with the Okta thing. It's not on our radar in any other sense of the word. And that's why I brought the grant to the commission before, because I had major concerns about the grant dealing with the interpretive center buildings. And that's why I specifically said at that meeting, in very specific words, that this is not about the interpretive center building except for individual group tours going into the building. It didn't say anything about having someone go in there and revamp the theater. It didn't say anything like that at all. Okay? That was very clear. It was very specific from this commission that it does not deal with any management in the future of the building. I didn't speak to the theater because I think the directive that we gave staff was the permission to go forward with this grant is assuming that there's no connection with CHP in the future, possibly with the management and the future of the building. Well, the theater is the future of the building. So if staff okayed CHP to go in there and start revamping the theater, that's beyond the direction that this commission gave at that last meeting.
Right.
And if you go through, I was very specific. I wrote it down when I said it. We can play the tapes back. So, and that was the direction we gave. It was for Scott to make the decision on when CHP went into that building to bring groups in, but it wasn't specific in terms of revamping the theater. Now, regardless of whether or not that was what the direction really was, I don't know now. Maybe everyone at this table tonight says maybe that's not what they thought it was. That's what I thought it was. But Scott didn't think that, and Scott, took that his way, and as did the city manager. And I'm not saying that's wrong. We have to be a lot clearer, and that's why tonight is not going to be a move forward, because a move forward to me means move forward in this discussion. A move forward to CEP means operating the theater tomorrow. So until we have it in writing and we have every detail in writing, I'm not comfortable moving forward. So we have to have another work session, or we have to have another, I think we can move forward on the Okta piece. I think that's a first step for this city working with CHP to move forward. I think the partnership in terms of the commission member on the board is a possibility to move. Those little steps are steps to move forward. But I think it needs to. I want this on the agenda soon. I don't want to keep putting it off, because we definitely need to address the fact that they have this grant money that we shouldn't have. They shouldn't have to pass up. But I don't know how specific we're going to get tonight.
Okay.
I have something I'd like to say. I think a step forward would be if we go back to the commission meeting where we discussed this, because I'm totally agreeing with Rocky. We said one thing.
That's okay.
And I believe we need to go back to that commission meeting, make it very black and white list of what was said and what the directive was there, and then have CHP come to us with very, very specific items that they want to do, and see if it follows our directive.
I had now Commissioner Mum.
I don't know. That's all very good and well, but I think
we didn't okay the business plan. We've not done that.
But whoa, please.
Commissioner,
May I?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I think it's all well and good, okay? I get that we gave direction to staff to do one thing, and whatever happened, and I'm not real clear on that myself. I'll go back and review the tapes, and for my own self, you don't have to do any dictating for me. I can review the tapes. But I don't understand if this was not something we were going to look at. I mean, how are we going to move this forward from here? So we got to wait for another work session. We got to wait till we get a commissioner on. We got to.
Yeah.
And is that the role? Is that the role?
Yes, listen. It's very easy to be caught up in Mr. Fowler's excitement. We've done that as an urban renewal commission before, in terms of a tram, and bought some property from it. And I think to move forward, we're going to have a broad consensus on this commission. I don't think we're at that point right now. And I agree that I think the direction was specifically to do something to make the Octa experience a good one. You say there are other things coming forward, that's fine, and we can have that discussion, but I'm not willing to launch into a partnership at this point. If the facility wants to be used to, for example, put on the current Bound for Oregon, which is owned by CHP, that's their program at the facility, and that's part of it. I have no problem with that either. Those are existing things.
Mayor,
But-
since I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's only 8:20.
That's right.
Absolutely.
So let me
we
just
haven't even
say,
hit
we're
the
in a
3 hour
work session
mark.
right now, and everybody's working. All the brains are engaged. Everybody's working on this. So maybe are there some points of agreement that could be reached while we have kind of everybody here and we're thinking about all this? So that
Look, I think, but I think, okay, now, for example, the notion is, you said repair the siding, right?
I'm sorry.
The siding needs work. You mentioned that,
There's some facility issues that need to be addressed.
and if, in fact, CHP has some money that they're looking at a match to meet those specific needs, because they need to be made, then I think we could go ahead and proceed. Now, whether they're willing to do that without having a stronger partnership in place, I don't know. But we know there are things that we need to do to make the facility workable. And I think those are things that we could look at.
Well, there might. I guess what my feeling is that the vendor, the wannabe vendor, is here. You guys are here. You know some of your questions. There may be others. Maybe it'd be good to have them come back up there and have more discussion.
I think
around
that's
some of
fine.
the items, the ones you
fine.
know you're going to agree on,
Yeah.
like pick the low-hanging fruit. Then the others that you know probably are going to be big sticking issues. Maybe we then have a second work session about those. Maybe we can identify some of those. I just want to know when I get up in the morning, so Scott knows,
Absolutely.
because we don't want to get crossways with the commission or with the vendor.
So can you put that on our next work session and just bump everything
Well,
down?
I would say within the next 2 work
Yeah, that was
sessions.
uncalled for.
Yeah, but go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. And I think it's a great suggestion to go back and look at the tape, because history gets a little foggy based on all of our biases. We haven't done anything on the theater room, the physical nature of the room. We've worked on the equipment. We've worked on things that we own.
Yep.
I mean, maybe we vacuumed or got the dust out of the stuff. I mean, but we're not doing anything without permission, and we're not doing anything on equipment that isn't owned by us. And I have no way in the world to figure out how we can get prepared for anybody if we aren't allowed to do that. So this idea, I mean, we have tried to be so careful about what we've done, and I don't know what we're afraid of.
I think that's the problem. If
What are we afraid of? Do you want us to literally, do you want the people with passion to go away?
No.
No.
Well,
But
then
you guys-
work with us.
Everyone on your board are extremely, extremely successful business people, extremely competent people, and I can't fathom how we got in this position with so talented people. And it's happened multiple times. So I have to know that going forward again, that I can trust it's not going to happen again. And I'm not there yet, Dan. And so how do we get there? I'm willing to get there. But we're not there yet. And
Maybe
you know,
it wasn't all the board's fault.
oh, I'm sure
Okay,
that's true.
so maybe, just maybe, now, I'm not saying it wasn't, I'm not saying they should have known some of it.
But when Marilyn talked
but if
about
you're
all
trying
the
to-
specifics on how to make sure a proposal goes further, that wasn't something that the board was aware of because it closed without us knowing or anyone knowing.
I think there's a misnomer on how much notice and what we were doing.
not from us.
Dan, I've got.
I'm
Dan-
not saying
Dan,
political-
I was on the commission at that time. I did not find out about the closure until I was on that bus tour going from museum to museum, and we were going to close next week. And we were not, as a commission.
I'm not saying as a commission.
Okay.
But our staff and working with the city staff, we're trying to work through that issue for a long time, and I do think that it was wrong that there wasn't more communication made.
Okay.
Can I
All
ask
right.
one question?
I really do.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be blamed for those things.
Okay, I have one question. And you're I mean, you're by far one of the most successful business people in Oregon City, and I know that you couldn't sit there and tell me that if someone was managing a building that you owned and it closed without any knowledge to you and all this the past that we've had, that you would just go hand them the keys to run it again. I'd know that you wouldn't do that as a business person, and if you say that you would, then it doesn't make sense to me. So how do I get
Our
there?
model before, Rocky, was you had a board, and you had an executive director, and you had staff. Okay? We weren't engaged day to day like we are now. There was an executive director.
But we have to see that, and I think we will see that as this partnership goes
We've been
further
doing
each
this for
step.
2.5 years, folks. We're not going to, we are going to flounder an opportunity if we don't get together on this.
Well, I think
We're going to
there's
flounder an
other
opportunity.
possibilities. There's other possibilities out there.
Because I'm telling you, you have no idea how close you are to losing this grant.
Yeah.
You have no idea. You don't think members of the foundation that gave us that money don't live in this community and aren't going to watch this proceeding?
See, and that's my concern, Dan, because I think we've been put in this position to have no other choice other than to let you move forward because we want you to have this grant. And that's not a position that I like to be forced into. And that's a very, very threatening tone. I want to be able to make a decision as a city commissioner based on the facts, not based on, we're going to
Tell me
lose
what
this
facts
money
you
if you
want.
don't let us have it.
Tell me what facts you
I'm
want.
not okay with that.
Tell me what facts you want. We have given you a business plan. Every one of you. How many comments have we got from it?
None.
None.
All I know is every business plan I've ever seen or any data financially that I've ever seen from CSP is not accurate.
I think
It's
I think we
created
did a
for
point. We're not having
Rocky,
we're not
I
having
sent them
great, excuse me. We're not having. I mean, I think our communication is not working too well right now. I'm going to suggest we have another study session soon. And I think we'll start again.
You've got to give me some direction. I'm sorry.
Can I give you some direction? I'm looking here at your, I believe this is your business plan. It's the first one that was in the packet. From my recollection, and this may not be totally accurate, but from my recollection, we said that if anybody was going to enter those buildings, that we would have to give advance notice.
Yes.
Okay? What I'm reading here is that we're going to be going in there and doing cleaning. Let me see if I can find exactly. I had several instances here. Revitalization of the interpretive center, including site improvements, cleanup, and repair. The next one down, A, goes into I can't get this to move.
We have gone in, Kathy, and every time we've got permission, and we've cleaned up the equipment and things. Yeah.
But it's the commission.
Why? I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I have to apologize. I thought that you gave, as a policy setter, direction to your management team, and that we sought permission from the management team.
Some of these things that I'm seeing, I don't think that was our intent, or that wasn't my
So
intent.
we're going to micromanage through the commission
No,
everything.
here's the thing. We set goals for the year, and we budget on goals for the year. Okay, so if we erase all the last meeting, there was miscommunication, that's fine. I understand that, and I'm not going to hold that against anybody because it happens. And when we get into situations with meetings that are on a time limit. Tonight, thankfully, we have the freedom to go beyond it. But if we had to have ended the meeting a half hour ago, we would have been nowhere. And that's where we've been almost every time we've had this topic, which is why we try to convey to staff in a short amount of time what we think we want. But it's not enough time to convey the message that we want, and so they don't have a clue of what to do. The only thing that we have is this book. And the only thing that this book refers to is that we're going to deal with the interpreter's owner only on the basis of the event coming up for Okta. That's the only goal that we set for this year. And when you came to us with the grant, I said, Dan, no goal has been, there's no city goal to support the operation plan for a CHP. We're not saying it's bad or good. We're just saying there was no goal for us to support that. There was no goal in the future for us to figure out what the management of that building was. There was no goal for us to figure out what the facilities were going to be like. That is not our goal for the year. So we have no business directing staff to do anything that's not on our own goals.
Should we
nor
just,
do they have
do
the
you want
business
us to
to
give
go
the money
forward.
back?
So the truth is the only goal is that we have to go forward.
I'm sorry, we meant to help. We meant to help, and I know that we don't get to choose everything that we do as a nonprofit or conventions coming here based on the city goal. We only meant it for good, Rocky. I mean, really, we meant it for good. If we're doing the wrong thing, tell us to turn it back in.
Well, I think there's a way for the grant to go forward in the way it was presented to us before it was presented, which was to do the grounds and to do some other things. Never was it presented to us that that grant was going to go to operating the theater. Never. It was never.
We're not operating the theater.
So if we don't, then we can go forward with the grant based on, then if that's true, Dan, if that's true, then we can go forward working with CHP on a grant for the grounds and for everything at the visitor center, but not the interpretive center building.
Well,
if that's true, what you're just saying.
Wait, first of all.
Because that's what we were presented with when we put our stamp on the city.
Well, wait a minute.
I already told you.
Well, wait a minute. I think there's a distinction. They're saying they're not discussing the operation of the theater. I think if that grant comes forward, we can meet that matching funds to get that theater operational, get the siting on, to do those things to make it a functional facility, and do that with CHP. I think that's fine.
Do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we can do a lot of stuff. So I don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot here. Where we've got this possibility of actually working on this facility, I don't agree with you that it's they don't have anything to do with the facility on the grant. They put forward the grant, and I think that can be the nature of the partnership, is to actually make this facility a workable facility. I don't have any problem with that.
I agree with that. I heard Rocky say earlier, what do we need to do in order to move forward? What steps? I heard you say, what steps do we need to take?
And so far, the mayor has presented several steps, and that apparently is not enough. But that's where we are tonight.
Well, look, I think what we have to do. I don't know if we're going to be very more productive at this particular meeting.
This is the kind of discussion we need, Doug.
Well, no. What I think has to happen next is actually a specific proposal, make it in short order, and what we're going to do with the building.
Exactly.
And how we're going to do it.
Yeah. Can we hear some more thoughts? Come on, and I would think your man. I'm so anxious to hear what each of you think.
Well, I'm looking at this, and you're saying there's nothing about the theater, but this 2B talks
Didn't
about...
say there was nothing about the theater.
Gail did.
No,
operating the theater.
Let us...
Honestly, no. Listen. When I wanted to apply for that grant, and I sent it to every one of you, I sent our business plan, I sent the grant. In the grant, if you will look at all the emails I sent, the grant details out everything we wanted to do.
Yep.
And it always did from the beginning.
Yeah.
So how it got all tangled up, I don't know, but I do know this.
I think it's
I am committed to working as a partnership, and I think the key is a strong partnership with the city, with the county, and with the state, because we are a state visitor center and a Clackamas County. We always felt like the city was our manager. I've always been very respectful about when I do go in, I send an email. I let them know. I've never done anything different. Takes a lot of work to work towards partnerships that I've done in these last 3 years, and I want to continue, but I can tell you the negativity hangs on like bricks, and we have to let them go.
Yeah, let me say this.
I agree.
I mean, I read through the grant, and I didn't have objections to it. The point is that we've had agreements that you could have events there, other organizations could have events there, but we've got to have some place we can have it in that. I mean, that is what I look at as the partnership. How do we make this an event center? And right now, it's not functioning that way. And I think that's the nature of the, and what I said, what my suggestion was basically a proposal of how that will happen to come back before us in short order. And that, I guess that's maybe what you need in terms of direction, is to how do
Whose proposal? Theirs?
No, the proposal is how do we actually get that facility so it can operate as an event center. Not their event center, our event center, in which they can have events there, and other organizations, including ourselves if we want to, have events there.
You want your staff to create that proposal?
I think you jointly talk to each other.
Okay.
I mean, I think you've heard the concerns here, but the concerns don't seem to center on us working together to make that an event center. The concerns are really in terms of the management of that center, and that doesn't seem to be a piece that's in the grant. Yeah, and so I think we're carrying a lot of baggage with us yet, and it's going to take not a short time. It's going to take a while to shake that baggage off. But my understanding of that grant is going to produce an event center in which maybe different organizations have events. Say CHP is likely to be one of them, and that's the nature of what I think we need to see coming before us. And I think I agree. I don't think there was anything in there that indicated that the CHP was going to be the manager of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center. I didn't see anything in the grant that said that, and I know, I mean, Commissioner Smith looked at it, and he felt rather comfortable in discussions with Scott Archer about it. His concerns was, is this going to evolve into something else that we have not had a discussion on? And the answer is, I'm getting from you, is no. The intent of it is to create an event center down there in which different organizations can actually have events. Am I wrong or am I right? Well, I mean,
that's taking it quite a stretch, Doug, to be honest with you, Mr. Mayor, because if you're talking about the exterior of the building, I think there's a great possibility for event and festival space, just as your plan called for. On the interior of the building, it gets really complicated, and here's why. We own $400,000 to $500,000 of specialized equipment and artifacts and displays inside that building.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the grant fully intended to see if we could get the Bound for Oregon, the physical nature of that equipment, up and running again. I think that we didn't know the condition, just like we didn't know the condition of many things down there. The fact of the matter is, once you know that that's operational, and if we can safely deal with the ADA issues, and if we can work together on the siding issues, and if the HVAC can get fixed for $2,000, and the roof is not in bad shape, then why in the world wouldn't we want the visitors that are coming there every day to be able to go in?
That's fine.
Why not? Why not? Because some organization messed up 4 years ago? Is that a good enough reason to not have visitors? I don't think it is. I think that's why we've tried to change how we've doing things there. So, does the grant lead to equipment improvements that leads to opening? Yes. Great. You know, but were we false? No, we didn't know what we had. We wanted to get those pieces understood. I think there's ways to work that out, work together. I would like to hear you give direction to your manager and your parks director to work with us, to propose management and operational ideas, to propose something to you. We think there's a way that not only can visitors come in, they can buy a ticket, and we think it is part of our responsibility to return some of that money back into the ongoing maintenance of the place. We think we can define those kind of things. We've talked about some of that already. It's like, let's work together on this. That's what we need to do. Yes, can other facilities use the event space? Absolutely. Does the park department want to manage that? Big question. Do they want to have that operational piece managed by us? Don't know. By somebody else? Don't know. But we can talk about that kind of stuff. But I think we have to try to get over the fear of opening. We need to do it safe. We need to make sure that it's done adequately and safe. We need to make sure if we do that there's restrictions on the management from the operator. I think all that stuff can be talked about.
Yeah.
I do too.
And I think we can get there. I think we can appoint a member of the commission. I think it'd be great. Our board's already talked about it. I mean, that
When
is.
does your board meet?
We meet when there's actions to be taken.
What time? What day?
I mean, I think they have to meet the needs of their board members, and so I think that's.
No, I mean, we could.
Is it usually an evening thing?
Yeah, it's either evening or early morning. I mean, the business people, you know. So, I just, you know, we're all kind of floundering a little bit with direction. And if the direction is, A, we want to open, B, let's get staff to figure out what an operational and management agreement looks like, C, let's define the areas of partnership that we as a nonprofit can work with the city on. I mean, those are the kind of things that we want to hear from you so that both of us know how to go work on those things and come back with an agreement.
Okay,
Are we doing this?
Go ahead. Yes, sure we are.
Is
Commissioner
Betty-
Roth.
Oh, is Betty above me?
No, go ahead.
Okay, now I don't want to sound like a. What do I don't want to sound like? I don't want to sound like. No, not a blanket.
Okay, good.
No, a fortune teller or anything like this. But I honestly believe that site is not ever going to be successful until there's a significant Native presence,
I think.
and there isn't anything.
I think that's a great. I think we should work towards. I don't disagree with you at all. The day we had our salmon bake, and the day we had the big thing down there, and the powwow was there, it's phenomenal.
Exactly.
Phenomenal.
But we have to move on with that. We can't just say, we're going to open the interpretive center the way it is now and add that in later. It's got to be right up front.
Back when it was Oregon Trail Foundation, I did a lot of work to try to bring the Native American community in, and they have some issues involving that site that hurt that. And I think that both sides need to be really willing, but I know that we are, and I would love that.
That was part
I would
of
love
what
that.
we wanted to do with this plan, with enhancing the Bound for Oregon. When Randy was talking about the front end and the beginning and the end, and what we want to do, and he gave the example of the Germans. Well, we wanted to work with the Native Americans and Black history and be inclusive and be able to customize it for the group coming or, visitors that we know are coming.
That area period in terms of Black history is a very negative one, of course.
I know, but it's there. But it's
all
still
history
there.
isn't positive.
All history.
And it's there. There's a lot. I mean,
Whether it's negative
the
or
German
positive.
history isn't very good.
But Commissioner Roth, I totally agree with you, and would not mind even writing that into our agreement. We need, to the best of our ability, to reach out and see how they would do
I will
it.
make an offer to you, and that is, I'm not familiar with the natives in this area. I'm from other areas.
Right.
If you can supply me with some names of natives from the Kalapuya, whoever, I can make some contacts.
Okay. I think it'd be...
Can we talk at some point?
Yeah.
Because I went to Baker City, and I went to the reservation there, and I
Just
can't
this
really
weekend. You just got
pronounce
back.
it. But I got a business card from the executive director. They have a phenomenal site. It's Tawats. Do you know what I'm talking about? What is it? Yes. And so, yes, I would love to. I would love to make the site. That's what we want to do.
I think
is
there's some-
integrate all of it.
And I think there's some expanded natures to the site, and quite frankly, some of the land that the city has on the other, near Washington Street and back in the trees, there are some, and I'm not trying to put it in the back, and I don't want to do it wrong. I don't want to put the white Anglo-Saxon eyes on it, okay? But I think there are some areas where if they thought they were good that could be used really well for that.
Well, one of the ideas, too, in inviting all of the community to come for that workshop for the 24/7 signage, self-guided, was to come up with those kinds of ideas for even outside. So if there is someone in the community that has an idea of what to do for the Native American signage, even for the self-guided, that's the kind of information we're looking for.
Absolutely.
And the ideas. And this
We're
is
way
what's
open to
going to
that.
bond us all together.
Yeah, we'll follow up. I mean, I totally agree with you.
Okay. Yeah. I would love to call you. That's
great.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
You can all be on our board.
No, we don't want
think
that.
you wanted to say
No,
that.
We'll all be there.
No. First of all, it would be illegal for us all to be I might be able to appoint 2 members, but I surely can't appoint us all. Anyway, I think there's perhaps enough here to actually work on a joint effort on the part of CHP
Been taking
and our
notes
staff.
so far. I have.
And I think I think the tensions rose up again. But I think we will be able to proceed with something that's going to work, and we'll keep the grant in the process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Scott, do you want to say what I'm thinking, or do you want me to say
Well, are you a mind reader? I want Scott to say what you think he thinks you think, and I want to see if you agree with him.
Yeah, we got to get flow going.
You know, I thought I was being weird.
I know, we spent way too much time together.
I would love for my boss to tell you what I
All right, let's hear it.
All right.
Who's going to speak?
Well, so I've taken notes, and I know Scott has taken notes, and there are some points of agreement here about the Native American presence, working on a tentative operations agreement. I'm not sure if that's one, but I put that down as a possibility. Preparing for the OCTA event and creating an events center should be sustainable, and some money should be put back into maintenance and capital. Put this on a future agenda. Don't know what this is yet, but we're getting there. We want a commission member on their board, and they seem to be agreeing to that. So those are the things that I've got notes on so far. I think to bring this on your future agenda may mean that we need to have some. Basically, I think it's a tentative work agreement that we could bring back with points of agreement that it would at least allow the short term. What do you do in the short term? Because a lot of the fear and the rebuilding trust, we learned from the Glazers, you can't rebuild trust if you're not talking. So the fact we're talking means we're still going in the right direction. What do you think?
Well, to me, I think that for now, if we come up with some sort of tentative agreement, it's for the summer season, and
Right.
we get through that, and
That's
then
what-
we take the
that's
next
what I'm thinking.
step. I mean, we have to have a progression that's moving
That's what I'm
forward.
thinking.
I'm not opposed to that, but
what
I
I'm
want to be assured as we go forward that I'm comfortable at each step we go forward. And so, I mean, we need to prepare the OCTA thing, these other things, the bridge event, and whatever, and the tourist season from essentially May through September, that's linked to the trolley. What are we going to do? What is our partnership going to be with CHP to get through that summer period? And
Is it the summer period, or is it the implementation
maybe the rest
of the
of the
grant?
year. I don't know. I
we
don't
could go
know
to
because I don't know what the
January 1st.
timeline is necessarily for the grant. But
Can I pick up on what both of you are saying? Because I do like the idea, in a method of building trust, sometimes you have to do shorter term agreements than longer term agreements. And I think that's okay. Because if things are right, why be afraid of a short term agreement?
right.
Okay, but what we might look at is the reality of some of the things coming up, and maybe it's this. I forget when the OCTA convention is.
July
July
2013.
So maybe, and I don't know if this is too much of a short-term agreement, but maybe we look at between now and July 2013 as a period of time, or July's right in the middle of summer, but something in there that says this is how we can operate for this next 12 to 18 months or whatever that period of time is, and talk about that. So it's not years and years, but there's reasons for what we put those parameters to it. But then, I don't know, just
Because the
it's
truth is
something
we
like
don't
that.
have a plan for that building long term.
Right.
And so it does no good for us to have the building sitting there empty. So, if we can take steps like that,
Yeah.
I can work towards that. And I think that'll lead to what the future of that building
Don't
becomes.
want to do anything
But
that sends the grant back,
No,
and
God,
the
no.
bottom line is, we need partnership. We
Yeah.
can't do it alone.
We don't-
So
we need each other.
Let me while that's on the table.
Yeah.
Is all the commissioners comfortable with us working on an agreement that's short-term in duration, with the duration being the Okta event? In other words, from now until the end of that Okta event. Do you want us to focus on that, or just this summer?
I would
Or-
say to the end of that summer. I mean, if we got some other events that are going to possibly come following that, then I would say through that season. Through that season.
So that might be-
Is that September?
September
When's the end of summer?
2013.
Yeah, just essentially.
It's, end of August.
Yeah.
But September.
Okay, September of 2013. Now, Scott, do you know for sure, is that is that July 2013 when that Okta?
It's July 2013.
Scott, you're not retiring before then, are you?
What's that?
You're not retiring before then.
He's not sure.
No.
So we're going to work.
You're not leaving before then, are you?
Absolutely not. Huh?
Or you're not leaving before
Not
then?
planning to.
Okay.
So when we leave here tonight, so you guys know, and I'm going to ask for thumbs because I want to know there's a consensus for Scott to work with this group on a tentative agreement that goes from now until August 20 or September 2013.
But I want to be somewhat inclusive in what might happen there. It can be facility improvements. It can the equipment improvements. You own it, but they need to be improved. Things that will add to what we can offer to whoever's coming through the system that summer.
So we're going to work on that agreement with them,
Yep.
and then when we get some tentative things in that agreement, we're probably going to email you to death with, I would suggest that, kind of like we with the jug handle. There's not any way to have too much information when you're trying to rebuild trust when you didn't have it.
Yes.
So I think we should give lots of information very frequently on those updates, and then we'll bring it back to the commission, probably in a work session format, so you can talk about it when we get a tentative draft. And then you'll need to look at that draft, compare it to the grant, make sure you're comfortable with the things that are in it. If you're not, let us know early and often, preferably when you see those emails. If you see something, oh my gosh, I don't know what that means, ask questions then if you can, so that when we get to the work session, we'll be down to really the hard stuff or the things that maybe we can't get a consensus on. So, Scott, I don't know what your workload looks like this next 2 months, but it seems to me that time is of the essence for the grant. Dan, do you have any information about a deadline? In other words, that grant, they're going to need to see some progress from us, I'm assuming?
Okay, well, a tentative timeline, it was December of 2012 for the 24/7 part of it. And then July 2013 is the Bound for Oregon.
Yeah, I'm talking about when we need that, so you don't have a
Well, I think-
reporting requirement that requires a tentative agreement by a date certain?
Oh, no.
That's what I'm wondering about. Okay, so I think if the commission is all okay with everything I just said, then we'll start working on that way. I see four heads, one last, okay, there we are. There's all five of them.
He's got a
So
thumb.
we're clear.
We got heads.
We have clear direction.
You said a thumbs
Scott,
up.
you have any follow-up?
I guess I just want to really make sure about some clarification.
Thank you, Scott.
So I appreciate all that just took place and the good understanding going forward. Between now and the time that we would bring something to the commission, I really don't want to get in a position where the commission is questioning whether I'm doing what you asked me to do or not do, because it's not the issue about the confusion about what happened with the previous thing and all that was no intent on my part. My intent is to carry out the direction of the commission, which is what my boss is directing me to do, and so I just want to be I don't want to be in that position of misunderstanding that. My understanding previously was the commission authorized the staff to sign this letter of support for the grant application, The grant application included what Dan and Gail have talked about. I thought it meant that we could kind of work towards that thing, not completely going into it, obviously, because we didn't have a grant and we didn't have an agreement in place. I was being very careful, and these folks have been really good. Gail has been great about communicating with us, and we've been careful about not opening that door too far, but at the same time trying to work towards what I perceived was the beginning of that discussion. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify that, you know, my intent was to try to carry out the wishes of the commission and nothing else. But between now and when we have a tentative agreement brought back to you, for example, Gail just mentioned they have a group coming in from Germany in a couple of weeks or something. So things like that are going to probably pop up a little bit here and there until we've reached consensus here on an actual formal agreement that's been signed. I'm still a little fuzzy about that little piece. I don't mean to go backwards in the conversation at all.
I think you can make that call. I think that's your call.
Yeah, so do I.
On a case-by-case basis.
I mean, the intent is to get things opened up, and if there are events that permit that to happen, I'm fine with it.
I just wanted, like I said, I'm not trying to go backwards in the conversation, but I just also don't want anything to get in the way of the progress that's been made here, so I just wanted to be careful about that.
Probably under my reports at every commission meeting between now and the time we have a tentative agreement, back in a work session, I'm going to be asking Scott if there's an update. Kind of like Friday highlights, when sometimes there's no highlights.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just lights, but sometimes the lights are out. But I want to have Scott tell you any current information there is on this so that you can try to be as comfortable as possible.
And if anybody in the German group comes around that has the last name of Boilert, I want you to introduce them to me. We might be related.
And we're going to have genealogy coming soon, so. You can
You know,
look that
sometimes these issues aren't easy, so I really mean this. I really appreciate kind of plowing through, because sometimes our human nature is to avoid the difficult when it's the very thing we should face.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
I really appreciate getting where we just ended up.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there a city manager's report?
No.
Very good. Study session is closed. And, you know, I'll tell you something.